This story comes from Sarah, who moved to Chicago right after college. Like most 23-year-olds starting their first real job, she couldn't afford much. The apartment she found was perfect for her budget, a one-bedroom in Logan Square. Older building, but clean. The landlord mentioned the place had been empty for a while, which explained the eager-to-rent attitude and the price that seemed almost too good. Sarah moved in on a Saturday. The building was quiet, that peaceful kind of quiet you don't expect in a city. Her apartment was on the 4th floor, and above her was the 5th and final floor. She spent her first night unpacking, organizing, making the place feel like home. She fell asleep easily, exhausted from moving boxes up 4 flights of stairs. At 3:17 a.m., she woke up. Footsteps. Clear, deliberate footsteps directly above her bedroom. Not the random creaks of an old building settling, these were footsteps. Someone was walking from one end of the apartment above to the other. Back and forth, back and forth. Sarah figured her upstairs neighbor must work odd hours. She pulled her pillow over her head and eventually fell back asleep. The next night, 3:17 a.m., the footsteps started again. Same pattern across the apartment and back. Over and over for about 20 minutes, then silence. By the end of her first week, Sarah was exhausted. Every single night at exactly 3:17 a.m., the footsteps would start. She tried earplugs. She tried white noise. Nothing helped because she could feel the vibration through the old building. It felt like someone pacing, anxious, repetitive pacing. On her 8th night there, frustrated and sleep-deprived, Sarah decided she'd had enough. She would go upstairs and politely ask her neighbor to maybe walk more quietly. Wear slippers? Anything? The next morning, she went upstairs to the 5th floor. There were only 2 apartments on that floor. She checked the mailboxes 5 Amperes and 5B. Both had names she didn't recognize. She knocked on 5 Amperes first. No answer. She knocked on 5B, the one directly above her apartment. An elderly woman answered, probably in her 70s, with kind eyes and a cardigan. "Hi, I'm sorry to bother you," Sarah said. "I live in 4B, directly below you. I've been hearing footsteps late at night, and..." The woman's face changed immediately. "Oh, honey, that's not me. I haven't been able to walk without my walker in 3 years. You hear me during the day sometimes, but never at night. I'm in bed by 8. Sarah felt a chill. "What about 5 Amperes? The woman's expression grew more serious. "That apartment has been empty for 6 months. The previous tenant, well, he passed away. Heart attack. Right there in the apartment. They found him a few days later. The landlord hasn't been able to rent it since." Sarah felt her stomach drop. "The landlord told me the building was fully occupied." "Did he?" The woman studied her. "Let me guess, you're in 4B, and the rent seemed really good." Sarah nodded. "That apartment's had 7 tenants in 2 years. None of them stay longer than a month. They all complain about the same thing, footsteps at night from 5 Amperes. But that apartment's been empty the whole time, ever since Mr. Petrov died up there." Sarah went back downstairs, her hands shaking. She looked up at her ceiling. That night, she waited. She kept her lights on, sat on her couch, phone in hand with 911 ready to dial. 3:17 a.m. The footsteps started, but this time, Sarah was listening carefully. They weren't random. They were following a specific path from what would be the bedroom to the kitchen, back to the bedroom, over and over, pacing like someone had done thousands of times before, like someone who had lived there for years, like someone who had died there and didn't know they were supposed to stop. Sarah broke her lease the next day. The landlord tried to keep her security deposit, but she didn't care. She spent one more night there staying with friends and hired movers to get her stuff out as fast as possible. As she was leaving with the last box, The elderly woman from 5B was checking her mail. "Smart girl," she said simply. Sarah asked, "Did you know Mr. Petrov?" "For 15 years. Nicest man you'd ever meet. But in his last few months, he got sick. Couldn't sleep. He'd pace all night, every night. I'd hear him up there, walking back and forth, trying to tire himself out. It never worked. He'd pace until dawn, then sleep during the day." "What time did he die?" Sarah asked, though she already knew the answer. The woman looked at her with sad, knowing eyes. 3:17 inches the morning. They estimated based on when his heart monitor alarm went off. He was alone when it happened, probably mid-pace. Sarah never went back. The apartment in 4B is currently listed online if you're interested. The rent really is good for that neighborhood. Just don't expect to get much sleep. This story is from Rebecca, and it's a reminder that sometimes the most terrifying things happen in plain sight, hidden behind the mundane routine of everyday life. Rebecca lived in a mid-rise apartment building in Seattle's Capitol Hill neighborhood. She'd been there for about 8 months, long enough to recognize her neighbors by sight, to know which ones smiled in the elevator and which ones avoided eye contact. She had a simple routine: leave for work at the gym at 6:30 a.m., back home around 7 p.m., grocery shopping on Thursday evenings, laundry on Sunday mornings. The man in 3 Farads, she never knew his name, was one of those neighbors who always seemed to be coming or going at the exact same time as her. For the first few months, Rebecca thought it was just coincidence. Apartment buildings work like that. People get synced up without meaning to. But then she started noticing patterns that didn't feel like coincidence anymore. When she left for work at 6:30, he was always in the hallway within 30 seconds of her opening her door. Every single time. When she came home, he'd be pulling into the parking garage right behind her, or getting off the elevator just as she was getting on. At first, Rebecca dismissed it, but the feeling wouldn't go away, that creeping sensation of being watched, of someone paying too much attention. One Thursday evening, Rebecca changed her routine without planning to. Her gym shift ended early, and she decided to come home at 4:30 instead of 7. As she pulled into the parking garage, she saw him, the man from 3 Farads, sitting in his car, engine off, just waiting. When he saw her car, he immediately started his engine and pulled out, pretending he'd just arrived. But Rebecca had seen him. He'd been sitting there, waiting. That night, Rebecca couldn't shake the anxiety. She stood at her window. Her apartment faced the interior courtyard, and across the courtyard, she could see into other apartments. She never really looked before. It felt invasive. But that night, she looked. 3 Farads was directly across from her, 1 floor down. His lights were on, and in his window, she could see something that made her blood run cold. A whiteboard. A large whiteboard, covered in writing. She couldn't read it from that distance, but she could see the structure, columns, times, notes. Her heart pounding, Rebecca grabbed her phone and zoomed in with her camera. The whiteboard was a schedule. Her schedule: Monday, Friday, leave 6:30 a.m. divided by returns 7 p.m. Thursday, groceries, Safeway on Pike, usually 7:38, 15 p.m. Sunday, laundry room 9 a.m. Tuesday divided by Thursday, sometimes goes running 8 p.m. Green Lake route. There were more notes, details about her car, details about her routine. A column marked observations with notes she couldn't fully read but could see were extensive. Rebecca's hands were shaking so badly she almost dropped her phone. She took screenshots, then immediately called the police non-emergency line. They said they'd send an officer. While she waited, Rebecca kept watching his window. The man appeared, walked up to the whiteboard, and added something. Then he looked out his window directly at hers. He waved. Rebecca dropped to the floor, heart hammering. He knew she could see. He knew, and he wanted her to know that he knew. The police arrived 40 minutes later. Rebecca showed them the photos. They took it seriously to their credit and went to knock on 3 Farad's door. Rebecca watched from her peephole as 2 officers stood in the hallway. No answer. They knocked again. Nothing. The building manager was called. They opened the door. Rebecca couldn't see inside from her angle, but she heard one of the officers say, "Jesus Christ." Later, after everything, the officer told her what they found. The whiteboard was just the beginning. He had printouts of her social media photos taped to the walls, not recent ones, but ones from months and years ago, showing her at different places, different times. He had receipts, actual receipts that he must have taken from the trash room, with her card number partially visible. He had a notebook filled with detailed daily logs going back 4 months, but the worst part was in the bedroom. He'd installed a small camera in the parking garage, positioned perfectly to capture her car in the driver's side door. The footage was saved on his laptop, hours and hours of it, cut into clips of just her, coming and going. The man was arrested later that night at his workplace. Turned out he'd started watching Rebecca shortly after she moved in. He'd become obsessed, convinced they were meant to be together. He was planning. The police found documents about breaking into apartments, about different methods of accidental meetings. He pleaded guilty to stalking and was sentenced to 18 months. Rebecca broke her lease and moved across the city, paying the penalty without hesitation. Here's what terrifies her most when she thinks back on it. She'd seen him dozens of times, smiled at him in the elevator, held the door for him, said good morning like a polite neighbor. And the entire time, he was documenting her life, planning something. She doesn't know what his endgame was. Maybe he didn't either. Rebecca's therapist says she did everything right. She trusted her instincts. She called the police. She took it seriously. But Rebecca still wonders, how many times had he been in the hallway outside her door when she didn't notice? How many times had he stood in the parking garage, watching? How close had she come to whatever he was planning? She has a doorbell camera now, and a different routine every single week. And she never, ever acknowledges neighbors in the hallway anymore, no matter how rude it seems. Because sometimes politeness can be dangerous. Sometimes the person who seems harmless is the one you need to fear most. And sometimes they're already keeping track of everything about you, you just don't know it yet. This story is from Rebecca, and it's a reminder that sometimes the most terrifying things happen in plain sight, hidden behind the mundane routine of everyday life. Rebecca lived in a mid-rise apartment building in Seattle's Capitol Hill neighborhood. She'd been there for about 8 months, long enough to recognize her neighbors by sight, to know which ones smiled in the elevator and which ones avoided eye contact. She had a simple routine. Leave for work at the gym at 6:30 a.m., back home around 7 p.m., grocery shopping on Thursday evenings, laundry on Sunday mornings. The man in 3 Farads, she never knew his name, was one of those neighbors who always seemed to be coming or going at the exact same time as her. For the first few months, Rebecca thought it was just coincidence. Apartment buildings work like that. People get synced up without meaning to. But then she started noticing patterns that didn't feel like coincidence anymore. When she left for work at 6:30, he was always in the hallway within 30 seconds of her opening her door. Every single time. When she came home, he'd be pulling into the parking garage right behind her, or getting off the elevator just as she was getting on. At first, Rebecca dismissed it, but the feeling wouldn't go away, that creeping sensation of being watched, of someone paying too much attention. One Thursday evening, Rebecca changed her routine without planning to. Her gym shift ended early, and she decided to come home at 4:30 instead of 7. As she pulled into the parking garage, she saw him, the man from 3 Farads, sitting in his car, engine off, just waiting. When he saw her car, he immediately started his engine and pulled out, pretending he'd just arrived. But Rebecca had seen him. He'd been sitting there, waiting. That night, Rebecca couldn't shake the anxiety. She stood at her window. Her apartment faced the interior courtyard, and across the courtyard, she could see into other apartments. She never really looked before. It felt invasive, but that night, she looked. 3 Farads was directly across from her, 1 floor down. His lights were on, and in his window, she could see something that made her blood run cold. A whiteboard. A large whiteboard covered in writing. She couldn't read it from that distance, but she could see the structure, columns, times, notes. Her heart pounding, Rebecca grabbed her phone and zoomed in with her camera. The whiteboard was a schedule. Her schedule, Monday, Friday, leaves 6:30 a.m. divided by returns 7 p.m. Thursday, groceries, Safeway on Pike, usually 7:30, 8:15 p.m. Sunday, laundry room, 9 a.m. Tuesday divided by Thursday, sometimes goes running, 8 p.m. Green Lake route. There were more notes, details about her car, details about her routine. A column marked observations with notes she couldn't fully read but could see were extensive. Rebecca's hands were shaking so badly she almost dropped her phone. She took screenshots, then immediately called the police non-emergency line. They said they'd send an officer. While she waited, Rebecca kept watching his window. The man appeared, walked up to the whiteboard, and added something. Then he looked out his window directly at hers. He waved. Rebecca dropped to the floor, heart hammering. He knew she could see. He knew, and he wanted her to know that he knew. The police arrived 40 minutes later. Rebecca showed them the photos. They took it seriously to their credit and went to knock on 3 Farad's door. Rebecca watched from her peephole as 2 officers stood in the hallway. No answer. They knocked again. Nothing. The building manager was called. They opened the door. Rebecca couldn't see inside from her angle, but she heard one of the officers say, "Jesus Christ." Later, after everything, the officer told her what they found. The whiteboard was just the beginning. He had printouts of her social media photos taped to the walls, not recent ones, but ones from months and years ago, showing her at different places, different times. He had receipts, actual receipts that he must have taken from the trash room with her card number partially visible. He had a notebook filled with detailed daily logs going back 4 months. But the worst part was in the bedroom. He'd installed a small camera in the parking garage positioned perfectly to capture her car and the driver's side door. The footage was saved on his laptop. Hours and hours of it, cut into clips of just her, coming and going. The man was arrested later that night at his workplace. Turned out he'd started watching Rebecca shortly after she moved in. He'd become obsessed, convinced they were meant to be together. He was planning. The police found documents about breaking into apartments, about different methods of accidental meetings. He pleaded guilty to stalking and was sentenced to 18 months. Rebecca broke her lease and moved across the city, paying the penalty without hesitation. Here's what terrifies her most when she thinks back on it. She'd seen him dozens of times, smiled at him in the elevator, held the door for him, said good morning like a polite neighbor, and the entire time he was documenting her life, planning something. She doesn't know what his endgame was. Maybe he didn't either. Rebecca's therapist says she did everything right. She trusted her instincts. She called the police. She took it seriously. But Rebecca still wonders, how many times had he been in the hallway outside her door when she didn't notice? How many times had he stood in the parking garage, watching? How close had she come to whatever he was planning? She has a doorbell camera now, and a different routine every single week. And she never, ever acknowledges neighbors in the hallway anymore, no matter how rude it seems. Because sometimes politeness can be dangerous. Sometimes the person who seems harmless is the one you need to fear most. And sometimes they're already keeping track of everything about you, you just don't know it yet. Look, I don't know if I believe all of that, but I do know this. Don't mess with things you don't understand. Don't play games with rules that don't make sense. And if you're ever in an elevator and someone gets on who doesn't feel right, someone whose eyes are the wrong color, whose smile is too wide, get out. Even if you have to pry the doors open yourself. Get out.
This story is from Jamie, an artist who learned the hard way that in New York City, if the rent seems too good to be true, there's always a reason. Jamie had just graduated from art school and was desperate to stay in Brooklyn. The problem was, like every artist in New York, money. She was cobbling together income from gallery assistant gigs, freelance graphic design, whatever paid. Her budget for rent was about $800 a month, which in Brooklyn basically gets you a closet with a hot plate. Then she found it, a Craigslist ad for a room in a 3-bedroom apartment in Bushwick, $550 a month. The ad was sparse, just the price, the address, and available immediately. First month, no deposit. Serious inquiries only. Jamie knew it was sketchy. But $550 in Bushwick? She called the number. A woman answered, older, maybe 50s, with a thick Eastern European accent. She said her name was Mrs. Kaminsky, and she owned the building. The previous tenant had left suddenly, and she needed someone to take over the room. No lease, month to month, cash only. Every red flag was waving, but Jamie was 3 weeks from being homeless. She went to see it. The building was exactly what you'd expect. Old industrial conversion, narrow stairs, dim hallways. The apartment was on the 4th floor. Mrs. Kaminsky met her there, a small woman with sharp eyes and a ring of keys that jangled constantly. The apartment was fine. 2 other bedrooms, supposedly occupied by quiet tenants who were never home when Jamie visited. The room itself was decent-sized. Hardwood floors, a window facing the street. There was a closet and a radiator that clanked. The furniture was minimal. A mattress on a bed frame, a small desk, a wardrobe that looked like it came from the 1950 seconds. "You take it?" Mrs. Kaminsky asked. Jamie hesitated. Something felt off about the room, though she couldn't pinpoint what. It smelled weird. Not bad, just stale, like no one had opened the window in months. But $550. "I'll take it," Jamie said. She moved in 2 days later. Mrs. Kaminsky took the cash, handed over a single key, and left. Jamie never saw the other tenants. Their doors were always closed, and she never heard them. It was like living alone, which was fine by her. The first week was uneventful. Jamie set up her little corner of Brooklyn, arranged her art supplies, started settling in. The room still had that stale smell, but she bought some candles and kept the window open. On her 8th night there, Jamie was organizing the wardrobe. It was one of those massive old wooden ones, heavy and immovable, and she noticed something. The back panel of the wardrobe didn't sit flush with the wall. There was a gap, maybe half an inch. She pressed against the panel. It moved slightly. Not much, but enough to tell her it wasn't actually attached to anything. Jamie pulled the panel away. Behind it was a door. A small door, maybe 4 feet tall, built into the wall itself. It had a simple handle, no lock. Jamie's first thought was that it must be storage space, maybe access to plumbing or electrical. But something about it felt wrong. The door was too deliberate, too finished. Someone had built this to be used, not just for maintenance access. She opened it. Inside was a space about 6 feet deep and 4 feet wide. A small room, or a large closet. It was dark. Jamie used her phone flashlight. The space was filled with belongings, not neatly stored times filled asterisk, piled with stuff. Clothes, mostly women's clothes, shoes, boxes, a laptop, books, art supplies, journals, personal items, makeup, jewelry, photographs, all of it covered in a thick layer of dust. Jamie's heart was pounding. This wasn't just storage. This was someone's life, someone's belongings, left behind like they'd vanished. She pulled out one of the journals. The handwriting was frantic, entries getting shorter and more erratic as the pages went on. Jamie read, asterisk, October 3rd. Mrs. K says the smell is just the old building, but it's getting worse. It's coming from the walls. Asterisk. Asterisk. October 8th. I keep hearing something at night, scratching, inside the walls. Asterisk. Asterisk. October 15th. Found the door behind the wardrobe. Going to check tomorrow. Asterisk. Asterisk. October 16th. There's something wrong with this room. Something wrong with this whole building. I need to leave. Asterisk. That was the last entry. October 16th. Jamie checked the year 2 years ago. She grabbed the laptop, heart racing now. It was dead, but she brought it to her desk and plugged it in. While it charged, she went through more of the stuff. There were paintings, really good paintings, the kind Jamie recognized as serious art school work. There were acceptance letters to galleries. There were photos of a young woman, maybe Jamie's age, with dark curly hair and a bright smile. The laptop powered on. No password. The desktop background was a photo of the same woman. Jamie opened the documents folder. There was a file labeled Important, read this. She opened it. It was a letter addressed to whoever finds this. Asterisk. My name is Sophie Brennan. If you're reading this, I'm probably dead, or I disappeared, or Mrs. Kaminsky did something to me. I don't know what's happening, but I know I'm in danger. Asterisk. Asterisk. I took this room 3 months ago. Same deal as you probably got too cheap, cash only, no lease. At first it was fine, but then I started noticing things. Asterisk. Asterisk. The other tenants don't exist. I've never seen them. I've tried knocking on their doors, no answer. I look through the keyholes once the rooms are empty. Completely empty. No furniture. Nothing. Asterisk. Asterisk. Mrs. Kaminsky comes into the apartment when I'm not here. I started leaving markers a hair across the door, books in a specific position. Every time I come home, things are moved. She's been in here. I don't know what she's doing. Asterisk. Asterisk. And the smell. God, the smell keeps getting worse. It's coming from inside the walls. I think something died in there. Or, I don't know. Maybe something's still in there. Asterisk. Asterisk, I found the hidden space behind the wardrobe last week. I moved my important stuff in there because I don't trust Mrs. K not to go through my things. I'm going to confront her tomorrow and break my lease. I don't care about losing the money. Asterisk. Asterisk. If you're reading this and I'm not here, get out. Don't stay in this room. Don't trust Mrs. Kaminsky. And whatever you do, don't let her know you found this space. Asterisk. Asterisk. Please, if you find this, call the police. Tell them about Sophie Brennan. Tell them to search this building. Asterisk. Asterisk address. Redacted asterisk. Asterisk. Date. October 16th. Asterisk. Jamie sat there staring at the screen, her hands shaking. She Googled Sophie Brennan, Brooklyn, missing. The first result was a missing person report from 2 years ago. Sophie Brennan, 24, last seen in Bushwick. No leads. Case went cold after 6 months. Jamie looked at the photo in the article. It was her, the woman from the photographs. The woman who'd lived in this room, who'd written in those journals, who'd hidden her stuff behind the wardrobe. The woman who disappeared. Jamie stood up. She needed to leave. Now, she started throwing her things into bags, and she heard it from inside the walls. Scratching, slow, deliberate scratching, like fingernails on drywall. It was coming from the wall next to the wardrobe. Jamie ran to the door. Locked. She hadn't locked it. The deadbolt was engaged, the chain was on, but she hadn't done that. From the hallway outside, she heard keys jangling. Mrs. Kaminsky's voice. "You find something you shouldn't find?" The scratching in the walls got louder, more frantic. Jamie did the only thing she could think of. She went back to the wardrobe, climbed into the hidden space, and pulled the panel closed behind her. She called 911, whispering, trying to explain where she was. She could hear Mrs. Kaminsky enter the apartment, could hear her moving through the room, could hear her open the wardrobe. "I know you're in there," Mrs. Kaminsky said, her voice cold. "They always hide in there. You think you're smart, but you all hide in the same place." The scratching in the walls was directly behind Jamie now. So close. Something was on the other side of that wall, something that had been there for a long time. Jamie huddled in that space, surrounded by Sophie Brennan's belongings, waiting for the police. She could hear Mrs. Kaminsky trying to move the wardrobe, trying to get to the panel. The police arrived 12 minutes later. Jamie heard the commotion, heard Mrs. Kaminsky protesting in that thick accent, heard the officers demanding she open the door. When they finally got Jamie out, Mrs. Kaminsky was in handcuffs. The officers searched the apartment. Behind the wall, the one where the scratching had been coming from, they found a crawl space. Access from a panel in the hallway that had been sealed over. Inside the crawl space, they found remains. Human remains. Multiple sets. One of them was identified as Sophie Brennan. Mrs. Kaminsky was charged with 3 murders. Turns out she'd been doing this for years, renting rooms cheap to young women, mostly artists or students, people who wouldn't be missed quickly, people who paid cash, didn't have leases. When they found the hidden spaces, or started asking questions, she'd handle it. The scratching Jamie heard. The coroner said it was probably rats in the walls. Just rats, disturbed by the vibrations of people in the room. But Jamie doesn't believe that. She thinks Sophie was trying to warn her. She thinks Sophie was still there, somehow trying to save the next girl. Jamie never went back for the rest of her stuff. She didn't care. Mrs. Kaminsky is in prison now, and the building was condemned. The city found evidence of structural issues unsurprising, given what was hidden in those walls. Jamie lives in Queens now. She pays market rate for a tiny studio. It's expensive and cramped, and she can barely afford it. But the rent isn't too good to be true, and she knows exactly who her landlord is. And there's nothing hidden in her walls except wiring and insulation. Sometimes she thinks about Sophie's paintings, still in that hidden space or wherever the police took them as evidence. She wonders if Sophie's family ever got them back. She wonders if Sophie is at peace now. And she wonders how many other buildings in New York have spaces like that. Hidden rooms behind wardrobes, crawl spaces in the walls, places where people disappeared, places where the rent is just too good to be true. This one comes from David. And it's the kind of story that makes you think twice about taking the last train home. David worked as a sous chef at a restaurant in the West Village. His shifts ended late, usually around 1 a.m. after cleanup. He'd take the subway home to his place in Astoria, Queens. The commute was simple. The L train to Union Square, transfer to the N or the W, ride it to the end of the line. At 1:30 inches the morning, the subway is a different world. You know what I mean if you've ever been down there that late. The fluorescent lights seem harsher. The platforms echo differently. The people you see, the few that are there, seem like they're occupying a different reality than the daytime commuters. David was used to it. 5 nights a week for 2 years, same routine. He'd gotten comfortable with the late-night subway rhythm. He knew which car to board to be closest to the exit at his stop. He knew which platforms had the most light. He knew to keep his headphones in, but the volume low enough to stay aware. It was a Thursday in March when things changed. David got to the 14th Street L train platform around 1:40 a.m. It was emptier than usual, just him and one other person. A man, standing at the far end of the platform, maybe 60 feet away. The man was completely still, not checking his phone, not pacing, not doing anything, just standing there, facing the tunnel where the train would come from. He was wearing dark clothes, a long coat that seemed too heavy for march, and his hands were at his sides. David felt an immediate sense of wrongness. It's hard to explain if you haven't felt it, but your body knows when something isn't right. The hair on your arms stands up. Your stomach tightens. Every instinct says, asterisk, pay attention, asterisk. The man never moved, didn't shift his weight, didn't look around, just stared at that dark tunnel. The L train pulled in. David got into the middle car. Through the windows, he watched the man. At the last second before the doors closed, the man got on, but at the far end of the train, the last car. David told himself he was being paranoid. Plenty of weird people on the late-night subway. Doesn't mean anything. He got off at Union Square to transfer. The platform was busier here, maybe 15 people waiting for various trains. David felt better with more people around. He stood in the middle of the platform waiting for the end train. Then he saw him, the man in the long coat, standing at the far end of the platform, still completely motionless, still staring straight ahead. David's heart started pounding. Same guy, had to be. Same coat, same posture. But how did he get here? David had been walking quickly through the Union Square station. It's a maze of tunnels and corridors. The man would have had to take the exact same route, at the exact same pace, to end up on this platform, unless he'd been following. The end train arrived. David got on, positioning himself where he could see the length of the train through the connected cars. The man got on the last car again. David's stop was Astoria Boulevard, almost at the end of the line. About 35 minutes from Union Square at this time of night. He spent the entire ride watching. The man never moved from his position, never sat down, never looked at his phone, just stood there, one hand on the pole, facing forward. And here's what made David's skin crawl. At every stop, when the train would start moving again and the lights would flicker just for that split second of darkness, the man was closer. Not by much. Maybe one car closer, but closer. It was like he was moving during those moments of darkness between stations, crossing between cars while David couldn't see him. By the time they reached Queensboro Plaza, the man was 3 cars away. David could see him clearly now. His face was pale, almost gray in the fluorescent light. His eyes were open, but David couldn't tell if he was looking at anything. His mouth was slightly open. David made a decision. He'd get off at the next stop, not his stop, but the one before, and wait for the next train. Let this guy ride to the end of the line without him. The train pulled into 39th Avenue. David stood, moved to the doors. Through the train windows, he could see the man, still standing there. But now, David swears this is true, the man's head turned, slowly, mechanically, until he was looking directly at David. The doors opened. David got off. The man didn't move. The train pulled away. David stood on the platform, breathing hard, feeling ridiculous and terrified in equal measure. There were only 2 other people on the platform, a woman in scrubs who looked exhausted, and a guy passed out on a bench. David waited. The next end train wouldn't come for another 15 minutes at this time of night. 5 minutes passed. The woman in scrubs got on a different train heading back into the city. The guy on the bench didn't move. David was alone on the platform. That's when he heard it. Footsteps. Slow, measured footsteps. Coming from the stairwell. No one came up the stairs. The footsteps just stopped. David walked to the edge of the platform, looking down the tunnel for any sign of the next train. Nothing but darkness and the distant glow of the next station. He turned around. The man was on the platform. Not coming from the stairs. Not emerging from anywhere. He was just times there, asterisk, standing at the other end of the platform. Same position. Same stillness. Staring at David. That's when David ran. He didn't think, didn't plan, he just ran for the exit, taking the stairs 2 at a time. He could hear his own breathing, his footsteps echoing in the stairwell, but nothing else. No footsteps following him. He hit street level and kept running. 4 blocks to his apartment, didn't look back once. When he got home, he locked the door, put the chain on, collapsed against it. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely get his keys in the lock. He went to the window. His apartment was on the 2nd floor, overlooking the street. The street was empty, just parked cars and the orange glow of streetlights. Then he saw movement. At the corner, just at the edge of the streetlight's reach, someone was standing there, a figure in a long coat. David couldn't see the face from this angle, just the silhouette. As he watched, the figure moved. 1 step forward, into the light. It was him. David dropped to the floor, below the windowsill, his heart hammering so hard he thought it might actually burst. He stayed there for what felt like hours, but was probably 15 minutes. When he finally got the courage to look again, the figure was gone. David didn't sleep that night. He sat with his back against the door, lights on, every sound making him jump. The next morning, in the harsh light of day, he told himself he'd imagined it. Stress, exhaustion, the weird energy of the late-night subway playing tricks on his mind. But he checked the subway security footage online. New York's MTA has cameras on all platforms. Nothing. The footage from 39th Avenue station at that time showed him standing alone on the platform. No one else visible. But David knows what he saw. Here's the thing that keeps him up at night. 3 weeks later, he's scrolling through a neighborhood Facebook group, and someone posted a question. Did anyone else see the guy in the long coat near the Astoria Boulevard station? He's been standing on the corner of 31st Street for like 3 hours. Just standing there. Should we call the cops? Several people commented. They'd seen him too. Always at night. Always near the subway station. Always just standing there. Someone posted a photo. David's blood turned to ice when he saw it. It was him. The man from the subway. Same coat, same posture. Standing on a street corner near the station. The photo was taken at 2:47 a.m. The timestamp was clearly visible. David commented on the post. When was this taken? The person who posted it replied. Last night. Took the photo around 3 a.m. By the time I walked around the block, he was gone. David quit his job. He doesn't work late nights anymore. He moved to a different neighborhood, Brooklyn, nowhere near the N train line. He takes the subway during the day now, when it's crowded, when the lights are steady and don't flicker. But sometimes, when he's on a train and it goes through a tunnel, and the lights flicker for just a second, in that moment of darkness, he sees him, standing at the end of the car, getting closer. And David knows that one day, in one of those flickers of darkness, the man is going to reach him, and he doesn't know what happens then. He just knows he doesn't want to find out. This story comes from multiple sources, 3 different residents of the same building, and when you hear all 3 perspectives, you start to understand why trust is such a fragile thing in the city. The building was called the Meridian, a luxury apartment complex on the Upper West Side. 24 stories, doorman service, the kind of place where young professionals and established families paid premium rent for the security and convenience, the kind of place where you're supposed to feel safe. Luis had been the night doorman for 6 years. Everyone loved Luis. He knew every resident by name, remembered birthdays, accepted packages with care, always had a smile, and a have a good evening. He'd help elderly residents with their groceries, call cabs for people running late, keep an eye on residents' kids who came home from school before their parents got back from work. Luis was the reason people chose to live at the Meridian. He wasn't just a doorman, he was part of the community. Our first account comes from Rachel, a marketing executive on the 14th floor. Asterisk, asterisk, Rachel's story. Asterisk, asterisk. Rachel had lived at the Meridian for 3 years. Single, worked long hours, traveled frequently for work. Her apartment was her sanctuary. She decorated it carefully, invested in good furniture, made it feel like home. In January, she started noticing small things out of place. At first, she thought she was being forgetful. A book on the coffee table that she didn't remember leaving there. The bathroom door open when she thought she'd closed it. Her mail sorted in a way that didn't match how she'd left it. Then, it was bigger things. Her bed was made differently, hospital corners, which she never did. A mug in the dishwasher that she didn't remember using. The thermostat set to 68 degrees when she always kept it at 72. Rachel started to feel crazy. Was she sleepwalking? Was stress making her forget things? In February, she set up a test. Before leaving for a 3-day work trip to Chicago, she placed a small piece of clear tape across her apartment door and the frame low, where no one would notice unless they were looking. If someone opened her door while she was gone, the tape would break. When she came back, the tape was broken. Someone had been in her apartment. She went to building management immediately. They reviewed the security footage from her floor's hallway. Nothing unusual. No one approaching her door except her. But Rachel trusted her instincts. She installed a hidden camera in her living room. One of those nanny cams that looks like a phone charger. She positioned it to capture the front door and most of the living space. She left for work the next morning at 8 a.m., came home at 7 p.m. That night, she watched the footage. At 11:47 a.m., her apartment door opened. Luis walked in. He had a key. Not just any key, but what looked like a master key on a ring full of other keys. He didn't rush, didn't act nervous. He walked through her apartment slowly, methodically. He went to her bedroom. The camera didn't capture that angle, but she could see him disappear down the hallway. He was in there for 7 minutes. When he came back, he was carrying something. Her laptop? No, a book. He opened it, read a few pages while sitting on her couch, then put it back on the shelf. He went to her bathroom. She could hear the water running on the audio. He was in there for 4 minutes. Then he walked back to the front door, locked it carefully behind him, and left. Total time in her apartment, 18 minutes. Rachel felt sick. She watched the footage 3 more times, trying to understand what she was seeing. Luis Kind, trustworthy Luis, had just casually walked into her apartment in the middle of the day, like it was normal, like he had every right to be there. She didn't know what to do. Go to the police? With what evidence he hadn't stolen anything? Confront him? That felt dangerous. Tell building management? They'd protected him before, insisted the security footage showed nothing unusual. She decided to tell her neighbor first. Another woman who lived alone. Someone she'd had coffee with a few times. Maybe she was overreacting. Maybe there was an explanation. Her neighbor's name was Melissa. Asterisk, asterisk, Melissa's story. Asterisk, asterisk. Melissa lived on the 16th floor and had been at the Meridian for 4 years. When Rachel came to her with the video, Melissa went pale. "Oh my God," she said. "It's not just you." Melissa had noticed things too. For months. But she dismissed them as paranoia, as the stress of living alone in a big city playing tricks on her mind. Her shampoo bottle running out faster than it should, clothes in her hamper that smelled like they'd been worn but she didn't remember wearing them, her kitchen sponge damp when she hadn't used it that morning. The thing that finally convinced her something was wrong, her toothbrush. She'd started marking the bristles with a tiny dot of nail polish red on one specific bristle. Every morning she'd check. The dot was there. One day she came home early from work, sick with the flu. She went to brush her teeth. The red dot was gone. The bristles were wet. Someone had used her toothbrush that day while she was supposed to be at work. Melissa installed a camera too. Same brand as Rachel, different angle. She positioned it to capture her hallway and bedroom door. It took 3 days. Louise came in at 2:17 p.m. He went straight to her bedroom. He opened her dresser drawers carefully, like he knew exactly where everything was. He took out a shirt, held it up to his face, and just stood there for almost a minute. Then he put it back, exactly where it had been. He went to her bathroom. She could see him on camera picking up her perfume bottles, smelling them. He opened her medicine cabinet, looked through her prescriptions. Then he did something that made Melissa's skin crawl. He lay down on her bed. He didn't get under the covers, he just lay on top, on her side of the bed, and closed his eyes. He stayed there for 12 minutes. When he left, he straightened the comforter perfectly. You'd never know anyone had been there. Rachel and Melissa compared footage. They had proof-clear video evidence of Louise entering their apartments, going through their things, violating their privacy in the most intimate ways. They decided to go to one more person before going to the police. A lawyer who lived in the building, someone who could advise them on the best way to handle this. His name was David Chen. Asterisk, asterisk, David's story. Asterisk, asterisk. David lived on the 19th floor with his wife and 7-year-old daughter. He was a corporate lawyer, practical and methodical. When Rachel and Melissa showed him the videos, his first instinct was to call the police immediately. But then he remembered something. 3 months ago, his daughter had mentioned that the nice doorman had read her a bedtime story. David had been confused. "What doorman, sweetie?" "Luis," she'd said. "He comes to check on me sometimes when you and Mommy are asleep." David and his wife had laughed it off. Kids say strange things, mix up dreams and reality. Luis was always nice to their daughter in the lobby. Maybe she was just remembering that, turning it into an imaginary nighttime visit. But now, looking at these videos, David felt ice in his veins. He went home and checked his daughter's room. He'd installed a basic baby monitor when she was little, one of those with a camera. They didn't really use it anymore, but it was still plugged in, still recording to a cloud storage account they'd forgotten about. He pulled up the footage from the past 6 months. Luis had been entering their apartment regularly, usually between midnight and 2 a.m. He'd go directly to their daughter's room. The first time David watched the footage, he nearly vomited. Luis would stand in the doorway of his daughter's room just watching her sleep, for 20, 30 minutes sometimes, just standing there in the darkness. Sometimes he'd sit in the chair next to her bed. Once, David watched him read one of her picture books by the light of his phone, quietly, while she slept. Another time he watched Louise adjust her blanket, tuck her in more securely. He never touched her inappropriately, never did anything overtly harmful, but he was there, in their home, watching their child sleep, and they'd had no idea. David found dozens of instances over 6 months. Luis had a pattern. He'd come in every week or two, always at night, always when he knew the family was asleep. The 3 of them, Rachel, Melissa, and David, went to the police together. Asterisk, asterisk, the investigation. Asterisk, asterisk. The police took it seriously. They got a warrant for Luis's apartment in Washington Heights. What they found there explained everything and made it so much worse. Luis's apartment was a shrine to the Meridian building. The walls were covered with photographs, hundreds of them. Residents walking through the lobby, getting their mail, carrying groceries. Photos of apartment doors, with unit numbers marked. Photos taken from inside apartments through windows, showing the layouts, the furniture, the lives people lived. He had notebooks, detailed logs of residents' schedules. Rachel leaves for work 7:38 a.m., returns 6:30, 7:30 p.m., goes to gym Tuesdays and Thursdays 8 p.m., travels frequently for work. Melissa works from home Mondays and Fridays, grocery shopping Sundays 10 a.m., book club second Thursday of month 7 p.m. He had keys, copies of master keys he'd made over the years, carefully organized by floor, and he had collections. Items taken from apartments, a shelf of perfume bottles, a drawer full of jewelry, not expensive pieces but personal items. Photographs of residents that had been taken from their apartments. Clothing. A stuffed animal that David recognized as belonging to his daughter, one she thought she'd lost months ago. The police interviewed Luis. He didn't deny anything. He seemed almost confused by the fact that people were upset. "I was taking care of them," he said. "That's my job. I'm supposed to watch over the building, make sure everyone's safe and comfortable. I was just making sure everything was okay." When pressed about why he was entering apartments, why he was taking things, he said, "I wanted to be close to them. They trust me. We're a community. I'm part of their lives. I should be able to be part of their homes too." The psychiatric evaluation described him as having severe boundary issues stemming from childhood trauma and abandonment. He'd grown up in foster care, bounced between homes, never feeling like he belonged anywhere. The Meridian had become his family, but he'd created a version of that family in his mind that included intimate access to residents' private lives. He genuinely didn't understand why what he'd done was wrong. Asterisk, asterisk, the aftermath. Asterisk, asterisk. Luis was charged with multiple counts of burglary, criminal trespass, stalking, and possession of stolen property. He pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 4 years in prison plus mandatory psychiatric treatment. The Meridian building fell apart. Once the news broke, dozens of other residents came forward. They'd all noticed small things, items moved, strange occurrences they dismissed. Some reviewed their own security footage and found instances of Luis entering their apartments going back years. The building management was sued into oblivion. How had they not known? How had a doorman had access to master keys without oversight? Why weren't there better systems in place? The worst part, at least to Rachel, was the realization of how long it had been happening. Luis had been the night doorman for 6 years. He'd been entering apartments for at least 4 of those years, based on the evidence found in his apartment. 4 years of violations. 4 years of him walking through people's homes, touching their belongings, lying in their beds, watching their children sleep. 4 years of everyone thinking he was wonderful, trustworthy, part of the community. Rachel moved out immediately, broke her lease, didn't care about the penalty. She lives in a walk-up in Brooklyn now, 5th floor, no elevator, no doorman. She has 3 deadbolts on her door and a security system that would wake up the entire building if someone tried to enter. Melissa stayed a bit longer, but eventually left too. She couldn't sleep in that apartment anymore, knowing that Luis had been there so many times, touching her things, lying in her bed. She started therapy for what her psychologist called violation of safe space trauma. David and his wife moved to the suburbs. They told their daughter that Luis had been confused and made mistakes, trying not to traumatize her with the full truth. But their daughter had nightmares for months. She still insists on sleeping with her door locked, even now. The Meridian building tried to rebrand, installed new security systems, fired the entire management staff. But the damage was done. The luxury building that people had paid premium rent to feel safe in had become the building where the trusted doorman had keys to everyone's lives. Occupancy dropped by 40% in 6 months. Last I heard, they were converting it to condos, trying to erase the rental history, start fresh. But here's what keeps me up at night about this story. Luis wasn't a monster. He didn't assault anyone, didn't steal anything valuable, didn't physically harm anyone. In his mind, he was taking care of people, being part of their lives, watching over them, which means somewhere out there are probably other Luises, other doormen, security guards, maintenance workers, landlords, people with access to your home who've convinced themselves that crossing those boundaries is okay, that being trusted with a key means being invited into your private life. People who think that because you smile at them in the lobby, because you wish them happy holidays, because you trust them with your packages, that means they're entitled to be closer to you than you'd ever want. The scariest part isn't that Luis did this. It's that he did it for years, and no one noticed. Because he was nice, because he was helpful, because everyone trusted him. And trust, in a city of millions, might be the most dangerous thing you can give someone. This one comes from Alex, and it's a reminder that in New York City there's always a reason when something seems like a deal. Alex had been searching for an apartment in Manhattan for 3 months. The budget was tight, $1,200 a month, which in Manhattan might get you a corner of someone's living room if you're lucky. Every listing was either a scam, a shoebox, or required you to make 3 times the rent in monthly income, which Alex definitely didn't. Then he found it on Street Easy, a studio in the East Village. $1,100 a month. Hardwood floors, exposed brick, updated kitchen, actual windows with natural light. The photos looked legitimate, not the too perfect stock photos that scammers use, but real pictures showing a slightly worn but genuinely nice apartment. Alex called immediately, expecting it to be a scam or already rented. A woman answered, older, tired-sounding voice. Her name was Mrs. Valdez. She owned the building, she said. The apartment had just become available. Yes, the price was correct. When could he come see it? They met the next day. The building was on East 7th Street, a 5-story walk-up that had definitely seen better days but wasn't falling apart. Mrs. Valdez was exactly what she sounded like, late 60s, heavy accent, wearing a house dress and slippers even though it was 2 p.m. The apartment was on the 3rd floor, 3C. When she unlocked the door, Alex's first thought was, this is actually nice. Not perfect, the bathroom was dated, the closet was tiny. There was a weird stain on the ceiling near the window, but for $1,100 in the East Village? It was a miracle. Why so cheap? Alex asked, because he wasn't stupid. Mrs. Valdez hesitated. The previous tenant. There was an incident. Nothing to worry about now, but I have to tell you, it's the law. Someone died here. Alex had half expected this. In a city this old, people die in apartments all the time. How did they die? The police said it was suicide, Mrs. Valdez said, not meeting his eyes. A young man. Very sad. He jumped from the window. She gestured to the window with the stain on the ceiling below it. Alex walked over to the window. It faced an interior courtyard. Not much of a view, but the window was large, old-fashioned, the kind that slides up. He looked down. 3 stories to concrete below. When did this happen? 4 months ago. I had the apartment cleaned professionally, everything. But people are superstitious, you know. They hear someone died and they don't want to live here. So I lower the price. Alex thought about it. He wasn't superstitious. Death was sad, but it didn't make a place cursed. And he was getting desperate. I'll take it, he said. Mrs. Valdez looked relieved. Good. Good. You seem like a nice boy. Just keep the window locked at night, okay? For safety. Alex moved in a week later. The apartment was exactly as promised. Clean, functional, affordable. For the first 2 weeks, everything was fine. Better than fine. He was actually living in Manhattan, in a real apartment, not bankrupting himself to do it. Then he started noticing the cold spots. New York apartments are drafty. Alex knew this. Old buildings, poor insulation, windows that don't quite seal. But this was different. There were specific spots in the apartment that were always cold, not just cooler times cold asterisk. Like standing in front of an open freezer. One spot was right in front of the window, another was near the bathroom door. The third was in the corner by the closet. Alex could walk through these spots and feel the temperature drop 20 degrees instantly. His breath would fog. His skin would prickle with goosebumps. He mentioned it to Mrs. Valdez when she came to collect rent. She waved it off. Old building, bad heating. I'll send someone to look at the radiator. No one ever came. The cold spots got worse. Or maybe Alex just became more aware of them. He started unconsciously navigating around them, plotting routes through his own apartment to avoid walking through that freezing air. Then the dreams started. Always the same dream. Alex would wake up, or think he was waking up, and see someone standing at the window. A young man, thin, wearing a t-shirt and jeans. The man would be looking out the window, his back to Alex, and then, slowly, he'd turn around. His face was wrong. Not horrifying or monstrous, just times wrong asterisk, like looking at someone through water, features distorted and unclear. And he'd reach out toward Alex, mouth moving like he was trying to say something, but no sound would come out. Then Alex would actually wake up, gasping, and the apartment would be freezing cold, every time. The thermostat would read 48 degrees even though the heat was on. After the 5th time this happened, Alex started researching. He found an article in a local news site from 4 months ago. Asterisk. Police responded to a call at an East 7th Street residence where a 4-year-old man was found deceased in the courtyard. Authorities believe he jumped from his 3rd-floor apartment window. The victim, identified as Marcus Chen, had recently lost his job and was facing eviction. No foul play is suspected. Asterisk. There was a photo. Alex's blood went cold. It was him, the man from his dreams. Same thin build, same dark hair. Marcus Chen. Alex kept reading. There were a few follow-up articles, mostly buried in local news. Asterisk. Friends of Marcus Chen dispute police ruling of suicide, citing his positive outlook in recent job interviews. Marcus was scared about the eviction, but he wasn't suicidal, said roommate Jordan Liu. Something doesn't add up. Asterisk. And another. Asterisk. Despite family requests for a more thorough investigation, police have closed the case on Marcus Chen's death, ruling it a suicide. Chen's mother, Linda Chen, maintains that her son would never have taken his own life. He called me the night before, she said. He sounded worried, but not hopeless. He said something felt wrong with his apartment, that someone had been coming in while he was at work. He was going to install a lock. Asterisk. Alex sat in his apartment reading these articles on his phone and felt the temperature drop. He looked up. All 3 cold spots were active simultaneously. The air was so cold he could see his breath forming thick clouds. Frost was forming on the inside of the window, and then he heard it. A sound he'd been unconsciously hearing for weeks but had dismissed as building noise or as imagination. Scratching, coming from inside the walls. Frantic, desperate scratching. Alex went to see Mrs. Valdez the next morning. She lived on the 1st floor of the building. The apartment is haunted, he said flatly. I want to know what really happened to Marcus Chen. Mrs. Valdez's face changed. The tired old woman exterior cracked, and underneath was something harder. Scared. You should leave, she said. Break the lease. I won't fight it. Just go. Tell me what happened. She looked at him for a long moment, then sighed. The police said suicide, but I don't think so. I think something in that apartment killed him. Something? That apartment, 3C, it has a history. 7 tenants in 10 years. They all leave. They all report the same things. Cold spots. Dreams. Feeling like they're being watched. 3 of them reported that items would move, that they'd hear scratching in the walls, that they'd wake up with the window open even though they'd locked it. Why didn't you tell me this? Because I need to rent the apartment. Mrs. Valdez's voice rose. You think I want to lose money every month on an empty unit? You think I believe in ghosts? But after Marcus, I don't know what I believe anymore. What do you mean after Marcus? She took a deep breath. 2 days before he died, Marcus came to me. He said someone was getting into his apartment while he was out. He wanted me to change the locks. I told him I would, but I didn't do it right away. I thought he was being paranoid, imagining things like the others. She paused, her hands shaking slightly. The night he died, another tenant, Mrs. Kim, on the 4th floor, she called me at 3 a.m. She said she heard screaming from 3C, heard someone yelling, "Get away from me," over and over. Then a crash. Then silence. By the time I got upstairs, the police were already there. Marcus was in the courtyard. The window was wide open. The apartment was freezing cold, so cold there was ice on the floor. Ice in April. And the walls. What about the walls? There were scratches on the inside. Fresh scratches, like someone had clawed at them. The police took photos, but said it was just Marcus having a breakdown before he jumped. But I saw his hands when they took him away. No blood under his fingernails. Those scratches weren't from him. Alex felt sick. What's in that apartment? I don't know. But I know this building is old, built in 1891. And I know that before it was apartments, it was something else. A boarding house. Back then, the landlord was arrested for killing 3 tenants. Locked them in their rooms and let them starve. They say he walled up the bodies. No one ever found them. 3C was one of those rooms. Alex went back to his apartment. He didn't know what else to do. He had no money to move, no other options. But he was determined to figure out what was happening. That night, he stayed awake. Sat on his bed with all the lights on, watching the apartment. At 2:47 a.m., the temperature plummeted. All 3 cold spots intensified. The frost on the window spread, creating intricate patterns. And then Alex saw it, really saw it, not in a dream. The walls were moving, bulging outward, like something was pushing from inside. The scratching sound was deafening now, coming from everywhere at once. And then, near the closet, the wall cracked. Not a big crack, just a thin line. But through that crack, something pushed through. A hand, skeletal, ancient, covered in dried brown flesh like leather. The fingers were curled into claws, and they scratched at the opening, trying to make it wider. Alex ran. Grabbed his phone, his wallet, nothing else. He ran out of 3C and didn't look back. He slept on a friend's couch that night. The next morning, he called Mrs. Valdez and told her he was done. She didn't argue. She just said, "I'm sorry. I should have torn down that wall years ago." What wall? The one in the closet. It's not original to the building. Someone added it later, covering something up. Marcus wanted me to check it before he died. He said he heard the scratching coming from there. I never did. I was afraid of what I'd find. Alex never went back for his stuff. Mrs. Valdez had it boxed up and left it in the lobby. He lost his security deposit, lost the best rent he'd ever had in New York. But 3 months later, he saw a news article. Asterisk. Residents of an East 7th Street building were evacuated Wednesday after construction workers discovered human remains sealed inside a wall in a 3rd-floor apartment. Authorities believe the remains may be over 100 years old, potentially connected to unsolved disappearances from the 1,890 seconds. The discovery was made during renovation work ordered by the building's owner. Forensic teams are investigating. Asterisk. They found 3 bodies in that wall, sealed up in what used to be a small storage space. They'd been there for 127 years. The building was condemned. Mrs. Valdez sold it for almost nothing. No one wanted to develop a property with that history. Alex lives in Queens now. He pays $1,800 for a studio, way more than he can afford. But the building is new construction, built in 2015. No history, no deaths, no walls with secrets. And when people ask him why he's willing to pay so much for such a small place, he just says, "In New York, if the rent seems too good to be true, there's always a reason. And sometimes, that reason is still in the walls, waiting." This story comes from Jenna, and it's about how easy it is for strangers to walk into your life when you invite them through a screen. Jenna was 26, working in advertising, living in a 2-bedroom apartment in Williamsburg with her roommate Casey. They'd found each other on a roommate matching site 2 years earlier and had become genuine friends, the kind of roommate situation that actually works. They had similar schedules, respected each other's space, did the dishes without being asked. It was good. Casey had been single for about a year when she started using dating apps again. Nothing serious, just casually seeing what was out there. Jenna would hear about the dates, the good ones, the awkward ones, the ones that made for funny stories over wine on their couch. Then Casey matched with someone named Ryan. "He's different," Casey said after their first conversation. "Like, actually interesting. He asks real questions, you know? Not just the usual, what do you do for fun? Bullshit." They texted for 2 weeks before meeting in person. Casey was excited in a way Jenna hadn't seen before. She'd showed Jenna their messages, long conversations about books, music, their childhoods, their dreams. Ryan seemed thoughtful, articulate, emotionally available. He had a good job in finance, lived in the financial district, had a dog named Parker. Their first date was at a coffee shop in Soho. Casey came home glowing. "He's perfect," she said. "Like, I don't want to jinx it, but I think he might be perfect." They started seeing each other regularly. Twice a week at first, then more. Ryan was always a gentleman. He'd pick Casey up, plan thoughtful dates, text her good morning and good night. He'd send her articles he thought she'd like, remember small details from their conversations. Jenna met him once, briefly, when he picked Casey up for a date. He was handsome in a generic way, dark hair, clean cut, nice smile. He shook Jenna's hand firmly and made polite small talk about the apartment. He seemed fine. Maybe a little intense with eye contact, but fine. After about 6 weeks, Jenna started noticing small things that felt off. Ryan always knew when Casey was home. Even if they didn't have plans, he'd text her right after she walked in the door. "Just got home?" he'd say. "Long day?" Once, Casey mentioned she was going to a work happy hour. She didn't tell Ryan which bar it was last minute, not worth mentioning. But halfway through the night, Ryan showed up. "I was in the area," he said. "Thought I'd say hi." The bar was in Midtown. Ryan lived downtown. It wasn't on the way to anywhere. "Isn't that romantic?" Casey said when she told Jenna about it. But Jenna saw something else in her friend's eyes. Not quite fear, but uncertainty. Then Casey mentioned that Ryan knew things he shouldn't. "It's weird," Casey said one night. "He knew I'd changed my hair appointment. I didn't tell him, I just rescheduled it on my phone calendar. But he texted asking if I was excited about getting my hair done Thursday instead of Saturday." "Maybe you mentioned it and forgot?" Jenna suggested. "Maybe," Casey said. But she didn't sound convinced. A week later, Jenna was home alone. Casey was at Ryan's apartment for the night. Jenna was watching TV when she heard a noise in the hallway. Not the building hallway, their internal hallway. The one connecting the bedrooms to the living room. She muted the TV. Silence. She figured she'd imagined it. Then she heard it again. A soft sound, like someone taking a careful step. "Casey?" Jenna called out. Even though Casey wasn't home, no response. Jenna stood up, heart pounding. She walked to the hallway. It was dark. They kept that hallway light off to save electricity. She flicked it on. Empty. But Casey's bedroom door was open. Jenna knew Casey had closed it before leaving. She always did. Jenna walked to Casey's room and looked inside. Nothing seemed disturbed, but something felt wrong. The air felt different, like someone had just been there. She checked the apartment door. Locked, chain on. The windows were all closed and locked. No one could have gotten in. Jenna told herself she was being paranoid. Old building. Doors don't always stay closed. Perfectly normal explanation. But that night, she couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been in the apartment while she was there. 2 weeks later, Casey found the AirTag. She was looking for her lipstick in her purse, and her hand touched something that shouldn't have been there. A small, smooth disc. She pulled it out. An Apple AirTag. She'd seen the news stories about them being used for stalking. "Jenna," Casey said, her voice shaking, "there's a tracker in my bag." They looked at each other, the same thought, unspoken. Ryan. Casey checked the AirTag on her phone. It was registered to an Apple ID she didn't recognize, but she could see its location history. It had been in her purse for 3 weeks. 3 weeks of Ryan knowing exactly where she was, at all times. Casey called Ryan immediately. "Did you put a tracker in my bag?" He laughed. Actually laughed. "What? No. Why would I do that?" "There's an AirTag in my purse, Ryan. It's been there for weeks. That's crazy. Maybe someone bumped into you on the subway or something. You know people do that, right? Put trackers on random people? It was plausible. Barely. Casey wanted to believe him. I'm coming over, she said. We need to talk about this. I'm actually not home right now, Ryan said quickly. How about tomorrow? Where are you? A pause. Too long. Just running errands. I'll call you later, okay? He hung up. Casey looked at Jenna. He's lying. I can always tell when he's lying. His voice gets weird. They decided to check Ryan's location using the Find My Friends feature they'd set up weeks ago. Ryan had suggested it, actually. Just for safety, he'd said. So we always know the other person is okay. Casey opened the app. Ryan's location showed him at their address, outside their building. He's here, Casey whispered. He's here right now. They ran to the window. Their apartment was on the 3rd floor overlooking the street. They could see the entrance to their building. Ryan was standing across the street, partially hidden by a tree, looking up at their window. When he saw them looking, he didn't run. He didn't even move. He just smiled and waved. Casey called 911 immediately. The police came quickly to their credit. They went down to talk to Ryan, but by the time they got there, he was gone. The officers took a report. They asked about the AirTag, about Ryan's behavior, about whether he'd ever threatened Casey. He hadn't. Not directly. Everything he'd done existed in this gray area, creepy but not necessarily illegal. Has he ever been inside your apartment? One officer asked. Not without permission, Casey said. He's picked me up a few times, waited in the living room while I got ready. But that's it. The officer exchanged a look with his partner. You might want to check if anything's been moved. Cameras, listening devices, people get creative these days. After they left, Casey and Jenna searched the apartment. They checked every room, every corner, looking for anything that didn't belong. They found 3 devices. One was a small camera, positioned on a bookshelf in the living room, disguised as a phone charger. Another was in Casey's bedroom, stuck behind her mirror with adhesive putty. The third was an audio recorder hidden inside a decorative box on the kitchen counter. All of them had been there for at least a month, based on the storage capacity and recording logs. Casey fell apart. She sat on the floor of her bedroom crying, while Jenna held her. He's been watching me, Casey kept saying. He's been watching me get dressed, watching me sleep, listening to everything. Jenna called the police back. They collected the devices as evidence. This time, it was enough for a warrant. They searched Ryan's apartment that night. What they found made the case a lot more serious than stalking. Ryan's real name was Michael Brennan. He was 34, not 29. He didn't work in finance. He'd been fired from a tech startup 2 years ago for inappropriate workplace behavior. The dog named Parker was stock photo. The apartment in the financial district wasn't his. He'd been subletting it illegally from someone he'd found on Craigslist. His actual apartment was in Queens. The walls were covered with printed photos of Casey, hundreds of them. Photos from her Instagram that she deleted months ago. Photos that looked like they'd been taken from outside her apartment window with a zoom lens. Photos of her at work, at the gym, at restaurants with friends. He had access to her email. They found the login credentials in a notebook. He'd gotten them through a phishing link he'd sent early in their relationship, disguised as a shared Google Doc. He had her iCloud backup password. Every photo she'd ever taken, every note she'd ever written, every text message, he'd had access to all of it. He'd been planning something. The police found a detailed timeline, a countdown of sorts. Lists of Casey's routines, her friends' names and addresses, her family's contact information, plans for how to isolate her from her support system, methods of making her dependent. They never found out what the endgame was. The detective told Casey they'd seen this pattern before. Stalkers who build elaborate fantasies, who create entire personas to infiltrate their victims' lives. Sometimes it ends with violence. Sometimes it ends with the stalker trying to kidnap the victim to start their life together. Michael Ryan, whatever his name was, he was arrested and charged with stalking, identity fraud, illegal surveillance, and a handful of other charges. He pleaded guilty to avoid trial. 3 years in prison, 5 years probation, permanent restraining order. Casey moved out of the apartment 2 weeks later. She couldn't stay there knowing he'd been watching, listening, recording. She moved back home to New Jersey, took a leave from work, started therapy. Jenna stayed in the apartment for 1 more month until the lease ended, then moved too. She couldn't live there anymore either, knowing that someone had been inside without their knowledge, setting up cameras, planning God knows what. Casey deleted all her social media, changed her phone number. She doesn't date anymore, hasn't gone on a single date in the 2 years since this happened. She's terrified that anyone she meets online could be another Michael, another person constructing a perfect persona to hide something dark. The thing that haunts Jenna most is how normal Ryan seemed, how perfect. Because that was the point he'd studied Casey through her online presence, figured out exactly what kind of person she'd be attracted to, and became that person. He knew she liked guys who read books, so he quoted her favorite authors. He knew she valued emotional intelligence, so he asked thoughtful questions and remembered her answers. He knew she'd had bad experiences with aggressive guys, so he was gentle and respectful. Every single thing about Ryan was calculated, designed, built specifically to make Casey trust him. And it worked. For weeks, it worked perfectly. Jenna thinks about that sometimes, how many other Ryans are out there right now, matching with women on dating apps, carefully constructing the perfect persona. How many other Caseys are texting someone they think is perfect, not knowing they're being studied, tracked, recorded. How many air tags are in bags right now? How many hidden cameras are in apartments? How many men have access to emails, iCloud accounts, calendars, photos, all the digital pieces of someone's life? The police told them that Casey was lucky, that they caught it before whatever Michael was planning actually happened. But Casey doesn't feel lucky. She feels violated, paranoid, like she could never trust her own judgment again. Because the scariest part isn't that Michael was a monster, it's that he wasn't. He was smart, organized, patient. He did his research. He played his role perfectly. And if you met him, you'd probably think he seemed nice, just like Casey did. This one's from Maria, and it's short, but sometimes the short ones stay with you the longest. Maria lived in a mid-rise in Hell's Kitchen, one of those buildings that's mostly fine except for 1 or 2 things that are deeply annoying. In her case, it was the laundry room. 12 floors of apartments, 4 washing machines in the basement. If you wanted to do laundry at a reasonable time, forget it. Every machine would be full, and people would leave their clothes sitting for hours. So, Maria started doing laundry late, really late. 2 a.m., sometimes 3 a.m. She worked evening shifts at a restaurant anyway, so her schedule was already backwards. And at 2 a.m., the laundry room was always empty. The basement was creepy, she'd admit that. Concrete floors, flickering fluorescent lights, exposed pipes running along the ceiling. The laundry room was at the end of a long hallway, past the storage cages and the building's old furnace room that nobody used anymore. But Maria wasn't easily scared. She'd grown up in the Bronx, worked in restaurant kitchens for 8 years. She could handle a creepy basement. She'd been doing her 2 a.m. laundry runs for about 3 months when she first saw him. She was loading her clothes into the dryer when she heard footsteps in the hallway. Heavy, slow footsteps. She looked up. A man was standing in the doorway of the laundry room. Big guy, probably 6'2", wearing a stained maintenance uniform and work boots. He had a ring of keys on his belt that jangled when he moved. Didn't know anyone else was awake, he said. His voice was rough, like sandpaper. Just doing laundry, Maria said, trying to sound casual. She didn't recognize him. He wasn't the regular building maintenance guy. You do laundry late a lot, he asked. When I can. Machines are always full during the day. He nodded slowly, still standing in the doorway. Not coming in, but not leaving either. Just watching her load the dryer. You should be careful down here at night, he said. not always safe. I'm fine, Maria said, hitting the start button on the dryer. Thanks, though. He stood there for another few seconds, then turned and walked away. She heard his footsteps and that jangling keyring disappearing down the hallway. Maria felt uneasy, but told herself she was overreacting. Building maintenance probably worked weird hours. Maybe he was just trying to be helpful. The next week, she saw him again. Same time, around 2:15 a.m. She was switching her clothes from the washer to the dryer when she heard those footsteps again. He appeared in the doorway. Same uniform, same keys. This time he came into the room, started checking the machines like he was inspecting them, but he kept glancing at her. "You here every week?" he asked. "Pretty much," Maria said, keeping her answer short. "Same time?" Something about the way he asked made her skin crawl. "It varies," she lied. He smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. "Building's pretty empty this time of night. Anything could happen down here and nobody would hear." Maria's heart started pounding. "I should get going. I'll come back for these later." "Dryer's already running," he said, gesturing to the machine. "Might as well wait. Takes 40 minutes, right?" He knew how long the dryer cycle was. Maria made a decision. "Actually, I just remembered I need to grab something from my apartment. I'll be right back." She walked toward the door. He didn't move out of the way immediately. She had to angle her body to get past him in the doorway, and as she did, she smelled him sweat and cigarettes, and something else, something sour. "I'll keep an eye on your laundry," he said as she passed. Maria walked down that long hallway as calmly as she could, every instinct screaming at her to run. When she reached the stairwell, she finally let herself move faster, taking the stairs 2 at a time up to her apartment on the 7th floor. She locked her door, put the chain on, and stood there breathing hard. Her laundry was still in the dryer. She'd have to go back for it eventually. She waited 2 hours. At 4:30 a.m., she went back down. The basement was silent. The laundry room lights were still on. Her clothes were in the dryer, dry, exactly where she'd left them, but they'd been folded, neatly folded, sitting on top of the dryer in a careful stack. Her underwear was on top. Maria grabbed her laundry and ran. Back upstairs, door locked, chain on. She didn't sleep that night. The next morning, she went to the building manager. Described the man, the maintenance uniform, the keys, the way he'd acted. The building manager looked confused. "We don't have any maintenance staff who work nights. Just Jimmy, and he works 8 to 4, Monday through Friday." "What did this guy look like?" Maria described him again. "That doesn't sound like anyone who works here," the manager said. "You sure he was wearing a maintenance uniform?" "I'm sure." The manager checked the security camera footage from the basement. The cameras were old, the footage was grainy, but they could see Maria entering the laundry room, loading her clothes, leaving suddenly. No one else appeared on the footage. The hallway was empty. The laundry room was empty. Just Maria, alone, the entire time. "There's no one else on the camera," the manager said. "You were by yourself down there." But Maria knew what she'd seen. She'd stood less than 2 feet away from him. She'd smelled him. She'd squeezed past him in the doorway. And someone had folded her laundry. The building manager agreed to change the locks on the basement access door anyway, just in case. And he told Maria she could do her laundry during the day. He'd make sure a machine was available. Maria never went to the basement at 2 a.m. again. But sometimes, late at night when she can't sleep, she thinks about it. She's looked at that security footage herself, the building manager. Gave her a copy because she asked. And he's right. The footage shows her alone. No one in the doorway. No one in the hallway. Which means one of 2 things. Either there was someone in that basement who knew exactly where the cameras were and how to avoid them, who had keys and access and was very, very good at not being seen, or there was something in that basement that didn't show up on cameras at all. Maria doesn't know which possibility scares her more. But she does know this. Someone folded her laundry. Someone touched her clothes, her underwear, arranged them carefully while she was gone, and she knows she heard those footsteps, that jangling key ring, that sandpaper voice telling her the building was empty and anything could happen. She still lives in that building. The rent's too good to leave, but she pays extra to use a laundromat now, 3 blocks away. It's expensive and inconvenient and stays open until midnight, at the latest, because whatever was in that basement, whether it was human or something else, it knew her schedule. It was waiting for her, and she's not interested in finding out what would have happened if she'd stayed those 40 minutes for the dryer to finish. This story comes from Nicole, and it's about how something as simple as a misdelivered package can unravel your entire sense of safety. Nicole lived alone in a studio apartment in Chelsea. She was 29, worked remotely as a graphic designer, ordered a lot of things online. In New York, packages were a constant Amazon deliveries, groceries, the occasional impulse purchase. Her building had a package room in the lobby, and Nicole checked it almost daily. On a Tuesday in September, she came downstairs and found a package with her name on it. Nothing unusual about that. She'd ordered some art supplies a few days earlier. But when she got back to her apartment and opened it, she realized immediately it wasn't hers. Inside was a photo album, old-fashioned, the kind with plastic sleeves where you slide photos in. The cover was burgundy leather, worn at the edges. Nicole opened it. The first page had photos of her. Not recent photos, these looked like they'd been taken from a distance, through a zoom lens. Nicole walking into her building. Nicole at the coffee shop on the corner. Nicole at the park 2 blocks away, sitting on a bench with her laptop. There were at least 20 photos, all of her, all taken without her knowledge over what looked like several weeks. Nicole's hands started shaking. She flipped to the next page. More photos. These were closer. Nicole, through her apartment window, she could see herself sitting at her desk, cooking in her kitchen, watching TV on her couch. Someone had been taking pictures of her inside her own home. Her apartment was on the 3rd floor. To get these angles, someone would have had to be in the building across the street, probably on the same floor, maybe 1 floor up. The next page made her drop the album. There were photos of her sleeping, in her bed. Close-up photos. Someone had been inside her apartment while she was asleep. Nicole grabbed her phone and called 911. The police came within 15 minutes. 2 officers, both taking it seriously once they saw the photos. They documented everything, took the album as evidence, asked Nicole questions about her routine, whether she'd noticed anyone following her, whether she'd given anyone a key to her apartment. She hadn't. She'd lived there for a year, never had any problems, never noticed anything unusual. The package had your name on it, one officer asked. Yeah, my full name and this address. But you didn't order it. No, definitely not. So whoever sent this wanted you to see it, the officer said grimly. They wanted you to know you're being watched. They checked her apartment for signs of forced entry. Nothing. The door, the windows, all secure. No scratches on the locks. No damage to the frames. Do you have any security cameras in the building? The other officer asked. Nicole shook her head. It's an older building. No doorman, no cameras. You need a key or someone has to buzz you in, but that's it. The officers recommended she change her locks immediately. Consider installing a security camera. Maybe stay with a friend for a few days. They'd follow up on the package, track the delivery, see if they could pull any fingerprints from the album. After they left, Nicole sat in her apartment feeling violated in a way she'd never experienced before. Someone had been watching her for weeks. Someone had been inside her apartment while she slept, and she'd had no idea. She called a locksmith. While waiting for them to arrive, she checked every inch of her apartment, looking for cameras, recording devices, anything that didn't belong. She found a camera in her smoke detector. Small, wireless, professionally hidden. If she hadn't been looking specifically for it, she never would have noticed. She called the police back. They came, collected the camera. The officer's face was grim. "This is escalating," he said. "Whoever this is, they've invested time and resources. They're obsessed. You need to take this very seriously." The locksmith came and changed her locks. Nicole installed her own camera, one of those Ring cameras that sends alerts to your phone. She covered her windows with blackout curtains. That night, she barely slept. Every sound made her jump. Every creak of the old building felt like someone approaching her door. At 3:47 a.m., her phone buzzed. Motion detected at her door. Nicole grabbed her phone, pulled up the camera feed. Someone was standing outside her apartment door. A man, wearing a hoodie pulled low, face turned away from the camera. He was just standing there, not moving. Nicole's heart was pounding so hard she could hear it. She dialed 911, whispering into the phone that someone was outside her door right now. "Don't open the door," the dispatcher said. "Officers are on the way. Stay on the line with me." Nicole watched the feed. The man stood there for another 30 seconds, then slowly turned toward the camera. He looked directly at it, as if he knew it was there, and smiled. Even with the hoodie obscuring most of his face, Nicole could see the smile. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was satisfied, pleased. Then he walked away, disappearing from the camera's view. The police arrived 7 minutes later. By then he was gone. They checked the hallway, the stairwell, the building entrance. No sign of him. "Did you recognize him?" the officer asked. "I couldn't see his face clearly," Nicole said. "But I've never seen that hoodie before. I don't think it's anyone in my building." They checked the camera footage, got a few frames of the man, but the hoodie and the angle made identification nearly impossible. They'd run it through facial recognition, but the officer didn't sound optimistic. "You should stay somewhere else tonight," he said. "Do you have family, friends?" Nicole packed a bag and went to her sister's place in Brooklyn. The next day, another package arrived. Same as before, her name, her address. Her sister brought it inside and they opened it together. This one contained printouts. Pages and pages of them. Screenshots of Nicole's emails, her text messages, her DMs on Instagram, her browsing history. Whoever this was had complete access to her digital life. There were also printed schedules, her work meetings, her doctor's appointments, her gym classes, everything from her Google Calendar, meticulously documented. And there were notes written in the margins. Asterisk, yoga class Tuesday 6 p.m. She looks beautiful in her workout clothes. Asterisk. Asterisk, lunch with Sarah at 1 p.m. She smiled when talking about her work. I love seeing her happy. Asterisk. Asterisk, dentist appointment. Thursday 9 a.m. I'll wait outside to make sure she gets home safe. Asterisk. The notes were written like someone who cared about her. Someone who thought they were protecting her, loving her. But the tone was possessive, obsessive. At the bottom of the last page was a printed message. Asterisk. I know you called the police. I know you changed your locks. I know you're scared. You don't need to be. I would never hurt you. I love you. I've loved you since the first time I saw you. You just don't know it yet. But you will. Soon you'll understand that we're meant to be together. Asterisk. Nicole felt sick. This wasn't just a stalker, this was someone who'd constructed an entire fantasy around her. Someone who had complete digital access to her life and believed they were in a relationship with her. The police took the package. They told Nicole her email and cloud accounts had been compromised. She needed to change every password, enable two-factor authentication on everything, possibly get a new phone. How did he get access to all of this? Nicole asked. Could be a lot of ways, the detective assigned to her case said. Phishing email, malware, stolen password from a data breach. Or, he hesitated. Or what? Or someone you know. Someone who had legitimate access at some point. An ex, a friend, a co-worker. Someone who got your passwords and never told you. Nicole went through everyone she knew. She hadn't dated anyone in over a year. Her friends were all people she'd known for years, people she trusted. Her coworkers were professional, distant. She couldn't think of anyone who would do this. The packages kept coming, one every few days. Package 3. Items Nicole had thrown away recently. A shirt she'd put in the trash because it had a stain. An empty bottle of her perfume. A receipt from a restaurant. Things taken from her trash. Package 4. A key. An actual physical key. With a note. Asterisk. I don't need this anymore. I've memorized your schedule. I know when you're home and when you're not. The key was just for the beginning. Asterisk. It was a copy of her old apartment key. The one she'd had before changing the locks. Package 5. Polaroid photos. New ones. Nicole entering her sister's building in Brooklyn. Nicole at a coffee shop she'd never been to before, one near her sister's place. Nicole through a window, her sister's window. Asterisk. You can't hide from me. I'll always find you. Asterisk. Nicole broke down. She'd left her apartment, changed all her passwords, installed security cameras, filed police reports. And this person was still there, still watching, still finding her. The detective told her what she already knew. This was one of the most sophisticated stalking cases he'd seen. Whoever this was had technical skills, resources, and an obsessive dedication. We're doing everything we can, he said. We're trying to trace the packages, pull prints, analyze the digital intrusions, but this person is careful. They know how to avoid leaving evidence. So what am I supposed to do? Nicole asked. We're working on getting you into a safe house program. Somewhere this person can't find you, but it takes time to arrange. On day 12 of this nightmare, Nicole got a package that changed everything. Inside was a work badge, a photo ID on a lanyard. The photo showed a man in his 30s, clean-cut, professional looking. The badge was from Nicole's company, the tech firm she worked for remotely. His name was Christopher Hale. IT department. Nicole stared at the badge. She'd never heard of Christopher Hale. She'd never interacted with anyone in IT except through email, and those were always generic help desk exchanges. But IT would have access to everything. Her company laptop, her work accounts, her calendar. And from there it would be easy to get into her personal accounts if you knew what you were doing. There was a note with the badge. Asterisk. You probably don't remember me. We were on a video call once, 6 months ago. Company-wide meeting. I saw you on the screen and I knew. I just knew. You're the one I've been waiting for. I've been taking care of you ever since. Making sure you're safe. Watching over you. Soon we'll be together for real. I'm being patient. But my patience won't last forever. Asterisk. Nicole called the detective immediately. They contacted her company's HR and security. Christopher Hale had worked in IT for 18 months. He'd been given administrative access to company systems as part of his job. No one had noticed anything unusual about his behavior. He was quiet, kept to himself, did his work. When security went to his apartment to question him, he was gone. The apartment was empty except for what the detective later described as a shrine. One entire wall was covered in photos of Nicole. Hundreds of them. Some printed, some Polaroids. Some looked like frame captures from video. Every photo was labeled with a date and a caption. Asterisk. March 15. She wore the blue sweater. So beautiful. Asterisk. Asterisk April 3. She laughed during the team meeting. I replayed that part 17 times. Asterisk. Asterisk. May 22. She went to the park. I sat 3 benches away. She didn't see me, but I saw her. Asterisk. There was a calendar on another wall with dates marked. X's on certain dates, going back months. Each X corresponded to a time he'd been inside her apartment, based on the notes beneath them. He'd been inside her apartment 23 times, and there was something else, a countdown. On the wall, written in marker, asterisk, days until we're together. 4, asterisk. That was written yesterday. The police put Nicole in protective custody immediately. They moved her to an undisclosed location, assigned officers to watch her. They put out a warrant for Christopher Hale's arrest, put his photo on the news. For 3 days, nothing happened. On the 4th day, the day Christopher's countdown reached 0, police arrested him at Nicole's apartment building. He'd been in the building the entire time, living in a storage unit in the basement that he'd broken into weeks earlier. He'd set it up like a small apartment sleeping bag, camping stove, battery-powered lamp, and a laptop with a direct feed to the camera he'd installed in Nicole's apartment before she'd found it and removed it. He'd been living directly below her for almost a month, going up to her floor at night while she slept, leaving and returning through the basement entrance that tenants rarely used. When they arrested him, he seemed genuinely confused about why the police were there. "I was just going to talk to her," he said. "Today was supposed to be the day I finally introduced myself properly. I have flowers. I have a ring. I was going to tell her how much I love her." He had a key to her apartment. The new locks she'd installed? He'd made copies already. He worked in IT. He knew about the security camera at her door. He'd been checking it remotely, waiting for her to come home. The detective told Nicole later that they found detailed plans in Christopher's belongings. He'd been planning to break into her apartment one more time, to be there when she arrived, to finally reveal himself and confess his feelings. And if she rejected him, the detective didn't finish that sentence, but they found a knife in Christopher's storage unit, zip ties, duct tape. Christopher Hale was charged with stalking, breaking and entering, computer fraud, and attempted kidnapping. The evidence was overwhelming: the photos, the packages, the digital footprint, the storage unit. He pleaded guilty to avoid trial and was sentenced to 12 years. Nicole quit her job, moved to a different state, changed her name. She doesn't have social media anymore, doesn't post photos online, keeps her digital footprint as small as possible. She's in therapy, has been for 2 years. PTSD, her therapist says. Severe anxiety, hypervigilance, trouble sleeping, all normal responses to what she went through. The thing that haunts her most isn't the photos or the packages or even the fact that he was living in her building. It's the realization of how easy it was for him. He had technical skills and administrative access, and from there he could see everything: her emails, her location, her schedule, her entire digital life. And she'd had no idea. For 6 months he'd been watching, collecting, obsessing, and she'd gone about her life completely unaware that someone was documenting her every move. She thinks about that sometimes. How many other people have that kind of access? IT departments, app developers, data brokers. How many people could right now be watching someone the way Christopher watched her? How many countdowns are happening right now, ticking towards 0? And how many people have no idea they're being watched until it's too late? This story comes from Nicole, and it's about how something as simple as a misdelivered package can unravel your entire sense of safety. Nicole lived alone in a studio apartment in Chelsea. She was 29, worked remotely as a graphic designer, ordered a lot of things online. In New York, packages were a constant: Amazon deliveries, groceries, the occasional impulse purchase. Her building had a package room in the lobby, and Nicole checked it almost daily. On a Tuesday in September, she came downstairs and found a package with her name on it. Nothing unusual about that. She'd ordered some art supplies a few days earlier. But when she got back to her apartment and opened it, she realized immediately it wasn't hers. Inside was a photo album, old-fashioned, the kind with plastic sleeves where you slide photos in. The cover was burgundy leather, worn at the edges. Nicole opened it. The first page had photos of her. Not recent photos, these looked like they'd been taken from a distance, through a zoom lens. Nicole walking into her building. Nicole at the coffee shop on the corner. Nicole at the park 2 blocks away, sitting on a bench with her laptop. There were at least 20 photos, all of her, all taken without her knowledge over what looked like several weeks. Nicole's hands started shaking. She flipped to the next page. More photos. These were closer. Nicole, through her apartment window, she could see herself sitting at her desk, cooking in her kitchen, watching TV on her couch. Someone had been taking pictures of her inside her own home. Her apartment was on the 3rd floor. To get these angles, someone would have had to be in the building across the street, probably on the same floor, maybe one floor up. The next page made her drop the album. There were photos of her sleeping in her bed. Close-up photos. Someone had been inside her apartment while she was asleep. Nicole grabbed her phone and called 911. The police came within 15 minutes. 2 officers, both taking it seriously once they saw the photos. They documented everything, took the album as evidence, asked Nicole questions about her routine, whether she'd noticed anyone following her, whether she'd given anyone a key to her apartment. She hadn't. She'd lived there for a year, never had any problems, never noticed anything unusual. The package had your name on it, one officer asked. Yeah, my full name and this address. But you didn't order it. No, definitely not. So whoever sent this wanted you to see it, the officer said grimly. They wanted you to know you're being watched. They checked her apartment for signs of forced entry. Nothing. The door, the windows, all secure. No scratches on the locks. No damage to the frames. Do you have any security cameras in the building? The other officer asked. Nicole shook her head. It's an older building. No doorman, no cameras. You need a key or someone has to buzz you in, but that's it. The officers recommended she change her locks immediately. Consider installing a security camera. Maybe stay with a friend for a few days. They'd follow up on the package, track the delivery, see if they could pull any fingerprints from the album. After they left, Nicole sat in her apartment feeling violated in a way she'd never experienced before. Someone had been watching her for weeks. Someone had been inside her apartment while she slept, and she'd had no idea. She called a locksmith. While waiting for them to arrive, she checked every inch of her apartment, looking for cameras, recording devices, anything that didn't belong. She found a camera in her smoke detector. Small, wireless, professionally hidden. If she hadn't been looking specifically for it, she never would have noticed. She called the police back. They came, collected the camera. The officer's face was grim. This is escalating, he said. Whoever this is, they've invested time and resources. They're obsessed. You need to take this very seriously. The locksmith came and changed her locks. Nicole installed her own camera, one of those Ring cameras that sends alerts to your phone. She covered her windows with blackout curtains. That night, she barely slept. Every sound made her jump. Every creak of the old building felt like someone approaching her door. At 3:47 a.m., her phone buzzed. Motion detected at her door. Nicole grabbed her phone, pulled up the camera feed. Someone was standing outside her apartment door. A man, wearing a hoodie pulled low, face turned away from the camera. He was just standing there, not moving. Nicole's heart was pounding so hard she could hear it. She dialed 911, whispering into the phone that someone was outside her door right now. "Don't open the door," the dispatcher said. "Officers are on the way. Stay on the line with me." Nicole watched the feed. The man stood there for another 30 seconds, then slowly turned toward the camera. He looked directly at it, as if he knew it was there, and smiled. Even with the hoodie obscuring most of his face, Nicole could see the smile. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was satisfied, pleased. Then he walked away, disappearing from the camera's view. The police arrived 7 minutes later. By then, he was gone. They checked the hallway, the stairwell, the building entrance. No sign of him. "Did you recognize him?" the officer asked. "I couldn't see his face clearly," Nicole said. "But I've never seen that hoodie before. I don't think it's anyone in my building." They checked the camera footage, got a few frames of the man, but the hoodie and the angle made identification nearly impossible. They'd run it through facial recognition, but the officer didn't sound optimistic. "You should stay somewhere else tonight," he said. "Do you have family, friends?" Nicole packed a bag and went to her sister's place in Brooklyn. The next day, another package arrived. Same as before, her name, her address. Her sister brought it inside and they opened it together. This one contained printouts. Pages and pages of them. Screenshots of Nicole's emails, her text messages, her DMs on Instagram, her browsing history. Whoever this was had complete access to her digital life. There were also printed schedules, her work meetings, her doctor's appointments, her gym classes, everything from her Google Calendar, meticulously documented, and there were notes written in the margins. Asterisk, yoga class Tuesday 6 p.m. She looks beautiful in her workout clothes. Asterisk, asterisk lunch with Sarah at 1 p.m. She smiled when talking about her work. I love seeing her happy. Asterisk, asterisk, dentist appointment. Thursday 9 a.m. I'll wait outside to make sure she gets home safe. Asterisk. The notes were written like someone who cared about her. Someone who thought they were protecting her, loving her. But the tone was possessive, obsessive. At the bottom of the last page was a printed message. Asterisk. I know you called the police. I know you changed your locks. I know you're scared. You don't need to be. I would never hurt you. I love you. I've loved you since the first time I saw you. You just don't know it yet. But you will. Soon you'll understand that we're meant to be together. Asterisk. Nicole felt sick. This wasn't just a stalker. This was someone who'd constructed an entire fantasy around her. Someone who had complete digital access to her life and believed they were in a relationship with her. The police took the package. They told Nicole her email and cloud accounts had been compromised. She needed to change every password, enable two-factor authentication on everything, possibly get a new phone. How did he get access to all of this? Nicole asked. Could be a lot of ways, the detective assigned to her case said. Phishing email, malware, stolen password from a data breach. Or, they hesitated. Or what? Or someone you know. Someone who had legitimate access at some point. An ex, a friend, a co-worker. Someone who got your passwords and never told you. Nicole went through everyone she knew. She hadn't dated anyone in over a year. Her friends were all people she'd known for years, people she trusted. Her co-workers were professional, distant. She couldn't think of anyone who would do this. The packages kept coming, one every few days. Package 3. Items Nicole had thrown away recently. A shirt she put in the trash because it had a stain. An empty bottle of her perfume. A receipt from a restaurant. Things taken from her trash. Package 4. A key. An actual physical key. With a note. Asterisk. I don't need this anymore. I've memorized your schedule. I know when you're home and when you're not. The key was just for the beginning. Asterisk. There was a copy of her old apartment key. The one she'd had before changing the locks. Package 5. Polaroid photos. New ones. Nicole entering her sister's building in Brooklyn. Nicole at a coffee shop she'd never been to before, one near her sister's place. Nicole through a window, her sister's window. Asterisk. You can't hide from me. I'll always find you. Asterisk. Nicole broke down. She'd left her apartment, changed all her passwords, installed security cameras, filed police reports. And this person was still there, still watching, still finding her. The detective told her what she already knew. This was one of the most sophisticated stalking cases he'd seen. Whoever this was had technical skills, resources, and an obsessive dedication. We're doing everything we can, he said. We're trying to trace the packages, pull prints, analyze the digital intrusions. But this person is careful. They know how to avoid leaving evidence. So what am I supposed to do? Nicole asked. We're working on getting you into a safe house program. Somewhere this person can't find you, but it takes time to arrange. On day 12 of this nightmare, Nicole got a package that changed everything. Inside was a work badge. a photo ID on a lanyard. The photo showed a man in his 30s, clean-cut, professional-looking. The badge was from Nicole's company, the tech firm she worked for remotely. His name was Christopher Hale. IT department. Nicole stared at the badge. She'd never heard of Christopher Hale. She'd never interacted with anyone in IT except through email, and those were always generic help desk exchanges. But IT would have access to everything. Her company laptop, her work accounts, her calendar, and from there it would be easy to get into her personal accounts if you knew what you were doing. There was a note with the badge. Asterisk. You probably don't remember me. We were on a video call once, 6 months ago. Company-wide meeting. I saw you on the screen and I knew. I just knew. You're the one I've been waiting for. I've been taking care of you ever since. Making sure you're safe. Watching over you. Soon we'll be together for real. I'm being patient, but my patience won't last forever. Asterisk. Nicole called the detective immediately. They contacted her company's HR and security. Christopher Hale had worked in IT for 18 months. He'd been given administrative access to company systems as part of his job. No one had noticed anything unusual about his behavior. He was quiet, kept to himself, did his work. When security went to his apartment to question him, he was gone. The apartment was empty except for what the detective later described as a shrine. One entire wall was covered in photos of Nicole. Hundreds of them. Some printed, some Polaroids. Some looked like frame captures from video. Every photo was labeled with a date and a caption. Asterisk. March 15. She wore the blue sweater. So beautiful. Asterisk. Asterisk April 3. She laughed during the team meeting. I replayed that part 17 times. Asterisk. Asterisk. May 22. She went to the park. I sat 3 benches away. She didn't see me, but I saw her. Asterisk. There was a calendar on another wall with dates marked. X's on certain dates, going back months. Each X corresponded to a time he'd been inside her apartment, based on the notes beneath them. He'd been inside her apartment 23 times, and there was something else, a countdown. On the wall, written in marker. Asterisk. Days until we're together. 4. Asterisk. That was written yesterday. The police put Nicole in protective custody immediately. They moved her to an undisclosed location, assigned officers to watch her. They put out a warrant for Christopher Hale's arrest, put his photo on the news. For 3 days, nothing happened. On the 4th day, the day Christopher's countdown reached 0, police arrested him at Nicole's apartment building. He'd been in the building the entire time, living in a storage unit in the basement that he'd broken into weeks earlier. He'd set it up like a small apartment sleeping bag, camping stove, battery-powered lamp, and a laptop with a direct feed to the camera he'd installed in Nicole's apartment before she'd found it and removed it. He'd been living directly below her for almost a month, going up to her floor at night while she slept, leaving and returning through the basement entrance that tenants rarely used. When they arrested him, he seemed genuinely confused about why the police were there. I was just going to talk to her, he said. Today was supposed to be the day I finally introduced myself properly. I have flowers. I have a ring. I was going to tell her how much I love her. He had a key to her apartment. The new locks she'd installed? He'd made copies already. He worked in IT. He knew about the security camera at her door. He'd been checking it remotely, waiting for her to come home. The detective told Nicole later that they found detailed plans in Christopher's belongings. He'd been planning to break into her apartment one more time, to be there when she arrived, to finally reveal himself and confess his feelings. And if she rejected him, the detective didn't finish that sentence, but they found a knife in Christopher's storage unit, zip ties, duct tape. Christopher Hale was charged with stalking, breaking and entering, computer fraud, and attempted kidnapping. The evidence was overwhelming: the photos, the packages, the digital footprint, the storage unit. He pleaded guilty to avoid trial and was sentenced to 12 years. Nicole quit her job, moved to a different state, changed her name. She doesn't have social media anymore, doesn't post photos online, keeps her digital footprint as small as possible. She's in therapy, has been for 2 years. PTSD, her therapist says. Severe anxiety, hypervigilance, trouble sleeping, all normal responses to what she went through. The thing that haunts her most isn't the photos or the packages or even the fact that he was living in her building. It's the realization of how easy it was for him. He had technical skills and administrative access, and from there he could see everything. Her emails, her location, her schedule, her entire digital life. And she'd had no idea. For 6 months he'd been watching, collecting, obsessing, and she'd gone about her life completely unaware that someone was documenting her every move. She thinks about that sometimes. How many other people have that kind of access? IT departments, app developers, data brokers. How many people could right now be watching someone the way Christopher watched her? How many countdowns are happening right now, ticking toward 0? And how many people have no idea they're being watched until it's too late? This one comes from an artist named Grace, and it's the kind of story that makes you wonder whether some things are better left unexamined. Grace lived in a loft apartment in an old industrial building in Bushwick, the kind of space artists dream about: high ceilings, massive windows, exposed brick. Affordable because the building was ancient, and the neighborhood was still rough around the edges. Her apartment was on the 5th floor, and the windows faced an alley that separated her building from another old warehouse across the way. The alley was narrow, maybe 20 feet across, and both buildings had fire escapes zigzagging down their facades. Grace's windows looked directly at the fire escape on the opposite building, close enough that if both windows were open, you could probably have a conversation with someone over there. But that building had been abandoned for years. Condemned, actually. Windows boarded up, graffiti covering the lower floors, the fire escape rusted and sagging. No lights ever came on over there. No movement, no signs of life. Grace had lived in her loft for 8 months, and in all that time, she'd never seen anyone in or around that building. Until she did. It started in October. Grace was a night owl, often working on her paintings until 3 or 4 a.m. She'd have music playing, lost in her work, occasionally glancing out the windows at the alley below. One night, around 2 a.m., she looked up from her canvas and saw something on the fire escape across the alley. A figure, standing on the 4th floor landing, directly across from her window. Just standing there, perfectly still. Grace froze, brush in mid-air. The figure was too dark to make out details. It looked like a shadow, a silhouette. But it was definitely human-shaped, tall, thin, standing with its arms at its sides. She stared at it for maybe 30 seconds. It didn't move, didn't shift weight, didn't look around, just stood there, facing her direction. Grace told herself it was probably a homeless person who'd found a way into the abandoned building. It happened sometimes in these old warehouses. She felt a pang of sympathy. It was cold out, starting to rain. Poor person was probably just trying to stay dry. She went back to painting, though she felt unsettled. When she looked up again 10 minutes later, the figure was gone. 3 nights later, she saw it again. Same place, same position. 4th floor fire escape landing, directly across from her windows, standing completely still. This time, Grace watched it for several minutes. It never moved. She couldn't make out any features, it was too dark, and the ambient light from the street didn't reach that high. Just a dark shape against the slightly less dark building. She thought about calling out, seeing if the person needed help, but something stopped her. Some instinct that said, "Don't engage." After about 5 minutes, she turned away to mix paint. When she looked back, it was gone again. Over the next 2 weeks, Grace saw the figure 7 more times, always at night, always between 2 and 3 a.m., always on that same fourth-floor landing, always perfectly still. And here's what started to bother Grace. It was getting clearer. The first few times it had been just a dark silhouette, but each time she saw it, she could make out a bit more detail. The shape of shoulders, the length of arms, what might have been hair or a hood. It was like looking at an old photograph that was slowly developing, features emerging from shadow. Grace mentioned it to her neighbor, another artist who lived on the third floor. "Oh yeah, the fire escape guy," her neighbor said. "I've seen him too. Creepy as hell, right? You've seen him? How long has this been going on?" "I noticed him maybe a month ago. I figured it was just some urban explorer or someone squatting in the building. The city's supposed to tear that place down eventually. Does he ever move? I've only seen him standing there." Her neighbor paused. "You know, I don't think I've ever seen him move either. He's just there, and then he's not." Grace felt a chill. "Have you ever seen him during the day?" "No, only at night." Grace started paying more attention. She'd set a timer, and every 10 minutes between 2 and 3 a.m. she'd look at the fire escape. The figure appeared around 2:15 most nights. It would be there, no transition, no moment of arrival. One moment the fire escape was empty, the next moment the figure was standing there, and it was definitely getting clearer. By the third week, Grace could make out that it was wearing what looked like dark clothing. She could see the outline of a face, though no features yet. She could see hands hanging at its sides, but it never moved, never turned its head, never shifted position. It just stood there, facing her building. Grace started taking photos. She wanted to document this, show it to someone, prove she wasn't imagining it. But when she looked at the photos on her phone, the fire escape was empty. The figure didn't show up on camera. She tried different cameras, her phone, her professional camera, even an old Polaroid. Same result. Empty fire escape. But when she looked with her own eyes, it was there. On November 15th, something changed. Grace was working on a particularly large canvas, standing about 6 feet back from her easel to get perspective. She glanced at the fire escape. The figure was there, but this time it was on the third-floor landing, one floor closer. Grace's heart started pounding. She stared at it. It was definitely clearer now. She could see that it was a man, tall and thin. She could almost make out the features of his face, but they were still slightly blurred, like looking at someone through frosted glass. And for the first time, she felt like it was looking back at her. Not just facing her direction, but actually looking at her specifically. She stepped away from the window, her breath coming faster. When she looked again, it was gone. The next night, it was on the second-floor landing. The night after that, the first floor. It was getting closer. 1 floor per night descending the fire escape, moving toward her building, toward her window, toward her. Grace called the police non-emergency line, told them someone was on the fire escape of the abandoned building, possibly trespassing. They said they'd send someone to check it out. 2 officers came, shined flashlights at the building across the alley. "I don't see anyone," one of them said. "Are you sure you saw someone over there?" "I see him every night," Grace insisted. "Between 2 and 3 a.m. He's always there." The officers exchanged a look. "Ma'am, that building's been condemned for 5 years. It's sealed up tight, no one's getting in there. And even if they did, that fire escape isn't safe. It'd collapse under any weight. But I see him. Could be shadows, reflections, the way the light hits. Old buildings play tricks on your eyes at night. But we'll make a note of it, have patrol swing by more often." After they left, Grace felt foolish. Maybe she was seeing things. Maybe she'd been working too late, too many nights, her eyes playing tricks. But that night, at 2:17 a.m., she looked at the fire escape. The figure was on the ground floor, standing in the alley, right at the base of the opposite building's fire escape, facing her building directly. And now, Grace could see his face clearly. It was a young man, maybe late 20s. Pale skin, dark eyes, expressionless. He was wearing clothes from another era. She couldn't quite place it, but they looked wrong. Too formal, too old-fashioned. And he was clearer than ever before. Almost solid, almost real. Grace backed away from the window. She closed her blackout curtains, something she rarely did because she liked the ambient light from outside when she painted. She didn't look out the window for the rest of the night. But the next evening, curiosity got the better of her. She opened the curtains. The figure was standing at the entrance to her building, across the alley but right at her front door, still perfectly motionless, still facing up toward her window. Grace watched him for hours. He never moved. Didn't blink. She was close enough now to tell. Didn't breathe. Just stood there. Around 3 a.m., he faded. Not walked away, not left faded, like someone had turned down his opacity in Photoshop. He got dimmer and dimmer until he was gone. Grace didn't sleep. She researched the building, the neighborhood, looking for any history that might explain what she was seeing. She found it in a Brooklyn historical archive. In 1987, a man named Daniel Reeves had fallen from the fire escape of that building. He'd been a photographer, working in a studio on the 4th floor, the same floor where Grace had first seen the figure. He'd gone out onto the fire escape to take photos of the sunrise, and the rusted railing had given way. He'd fallen 5 stories to the alley below, died instantly. The article included a photo of Daniel Reeves. Grace felt her stomach drop. It was him, the figure on the fire escape. Same face, same build. Even the clothing looked similar to what he was wearing in the 1987 photo. Grace read more. Daniel had been working on a photography project about the neighborhood, capturing the changing face of industrial Brooklyn. He'd been alone in the studio when he fell. His body wasn't discovered for 2 days. The article quoted one of his friends. Asterisk. Daniel was obsessed with that view. He'd stand on the fire escape for hours, just watching the city. He said there was something about seeing it from that height, at that angle. He said it felt like being between worlds. Asterisk. That night, Grace covered every window in her apartment with thick blankets. She couldn't look, couldn't bear to see if he'd moved even closer. But around 2 a.m. she heard something. A metallic sound, like footsteps on a fire escape. Her own fire escape. Grace sat frozen on her couch. The sound came again, slow, deliberate footsteps, climbing. She thought about calling 911, but what would she say? That a ghost was climbing her fire escape? That a man who died in 1987 had been getting closer every night and now he was outside her window? The footsteps stopped, right outside her window. Grace could hear nothing but her own heartbeat in the rain. Then, a sound that made her blood freeze, knocking. Gentle, polite knocking on her window glass. 3 knocks, a pause, 3 more knocks. Grace didn't move, didn't breathe, just sat there in the dark, blankets covering her windows, listening to that impossible knocking. It continued for 20 minutes, always the same pattern. 3 knocks, pause, 3 knocks. Finally, around 2:45 a.m., it stopped. Grace waited until sunrise before she moved. When light filled the apartment, she carefully pulled back one of the blankets. The fire escape outside her window was empty, but pressed against the glass, as if someone had been standing very close, was a handprint. Fingers spread, palm flat against the window. The print was on the outside of the glass. Grace moved out the next day. Didn't give notice, didn't pack properly, just threw essentials in bags and left. Her landlord kept the security deposit. She didn't care. She lives in Queens now, in a modern apartment building. 10th floor, no fire escape. Windows facing an open courtyard with no buildings nearby. She still paints, but only during the day. And she never ever looks out windows at night, because she knows now that some things exist in the spaces between buildings, between light and shadow, between the living and the dead. And some things have been waiting a long time to be seen clearly. Daniel Reeves spent his last moments falling. Between the fire escape and the ground, between life and death, maybe that's where he got stuck. Caught in that moment of falling, forever trying to reach solid ground. And for some reason, he chose Grace to see him. Chose her window, her building, her to be the witness to whatever he's become. She doesn't know why. Maybe it's random. Maybe her loft just happened to line up with his old studio. Maybe he's drawn to artists, recognizing something of what he used to be. Or maybe he's still looking for the right angle, the perfect view. Still standing on fire escape, still between worlds, still waiting for something. Grace just knows she's grateful she left when she did. Because that handprint on her window? The landlord sent her a photo when he was cleaning the apartment to re-rent it. There were 2 handprints. One on the outside of the glass, and one on the inside. This one comes from Ben. And it's a reminder that in a city where people live stacked on top of each other, separated by nothing but thin floors and ceilings, you never really know what's happening just a few feet above your head. Ben lived in a rent-controlled apartment in Washington Heights, 4th floor of a 6-story walk-up, the kind of building where the same families had lived for decades and everyone knew everyone. Ben had been there for 3 years, long enough to recognize his neighbors by their footsteps, to know who cooked what based on the smells in the hallway, to understand the rhythm of the building. The apartment directly above him, 5D, was occupied by a man named Mr. Kowalski. Ben had met him a few times in the stairwell, elderly, probably late 70s, Polish accent, always polite, kept to himself mostly. Ben would hear him walking around upstairs, the familiar creak of floorboards, the sound of his TV at night. In early February, Ben started noticing a smell. At first it was faint, slightly unpleasant, but nothing alarming. He thought maybe something had died in the walls, a rat or a mouse. Old buildings, it happens. But over the next few days, the smell got worse, stronger, more pervasive, sweet and rotten at the same time. It seemed to be coming from above, seeping through the ceiling. Ben mentioned it to another neighbor, Mrs. Chen from 3D. "You smell that too, right? Like something died?" Mrs. Chen wrinkled her nose. "Oh yes, it's terrible. I think it's coming from the 5th floor. Maybe Mr. Kowalski's apartment?" "When's the last time you saw him?" Ben asked. Mrs. Chen thought about it. "I don't know. Maybe 2 weeks? 3? He's very quiet, keeps to himself. But now that you mention it, I haven't heard him walking around lately." A cold feeling settled in Ben's stomach. "I'm going to knock on his door, check if he's okay." Ben went up to the 5th floor. The smell was much worse up here, thick, cloying, unmistakable. He'd smelled it before, years ago, when a family friend had died alone and wasn't found for several days. He knocked on 5D. "Mr. Kowalski? It's Ben from downstairs. Just checking if you're okay." No answer. He knocked again, louder. "Mr. Kowalski?" Nothing. But Ben could hear something inside the apartment. A faint sound, regular and rhythmic. It took him a moment to identify it. A TV. The TV was on. Ben went back downstairs and called the building superintendent. Explained the smell, the lack of response, his concern that something was wrong. The super arrived an hour later with a master key. They went up together. The smell outside 5D was overwhelming now. The super's face went pale. "Jesus," he muttered. "Okay, I'm calling 911. Don't touch anything." The police came. The fire department came. They opened the door to 5D, and even from the stairwell, Ben could smell it, that unmistakable odor of death. The police came back out quickly, one of them looking green. "We need the medical examiner," he said into his radio. "Probable natural death, advanced decomposition." The ME arrived. Ben waited downstairs in his apartment with other curious neighbors who'd gathered. Eventually, a detective came to talk to him. "You're the one who reported it?" the detective asked. "Yeah, I live right below him. The smell, it's been getting worse for days." "How long would you say you've been noticing the smell?" "Maybe 4 or 5 days?" Started out faint, got progressively worse. The detective made notes. And when's the last time you saw or heard from Mr. Kowalski? I haven't seen him in at least 2 weeks. Maybe longer. But you heard him moving around upstairs? Yeah, Ben paused. Actually, now that you mention it, I don't think I have. Not recently. But I hear sounds from up there all the time. Creaking, footsteps, his TV. I just assumed it was him. The detective's expression changed slightly. You heard footsteps? Recently? Yeah. I hear footsteps above me all the time. That's just apartment living. When's the last time you heard them? Ben thought about it. Last night. Around midnight. Someone walking from the bedroom to the bathroom, I think. The usual sounds. The detective looked at Ben for a long moment. Mr. Kowalski has been dead for approximately 3 weeks. The ME will confirm, but based on the decomposition, that's the estimate. Ben felt like the floor had dropped out from under him. 3 weeks? At minimum. Probably closer to a month. But I heard footsteps last night. Someone walking around up there. The apartment's been empty since he died, the detective said. No one else has a key. No family members. No friends who've been checking on him. You're sure you heard footsteps? Positive. I hear them all the time. That night, Ben lay in bed staring at the ceiling. His bedroom was directly below Mr. Kowalski's, or rather, below what had been Mr. Kowalski's bedroom. The apartment above was empty now, sealed with police tape while they conducted their investigation. Around midnight, he heard it. Footsteps. The familiar creak of floorboards directly above him. Someone walking from the bedroom to what sounded like the bathroom. The same pattern he'd heard hundreds of times before. But the apartment was empty. He knew it was empty. Ben got up, went to his door, looked out into the hallway. Everything was quiet. He went up to the 5th floor. The police tape was still across Mr. Kowalski's door, undisturbed. No light came from under the door, but Ben could hear it, faintly, through the door. Footsteps. Someone walking around inside the apartment, and the TV. He could hear the TV playing. The next day, Ben talked to the detective again. There's someone in that apartment. I can hear them. Someone's been going in there. The detective looked tired. Mr. Chen, the apartment has been sealed. No one's been in there except the ME's office and our investigators. The door's been locked and taped. Then explain what I'm hearing. Old buildings make noise. Pipes, temperature changes, the building settling. I know the difference between building sounds and footsteps, Ben insisted. Someone is walking around in that apartment at night. The detective sighed. I'll have officers do another check, but I'm telling you, no one has been in there. That night, Ben decided to record it. He set up his phone on his nightstand, voice recorder running, and waited. At 11:47 p.m., the footsteps started. Clear, distinct, right above him. He could track the movement from the bedroom, across the living room, to the kitchen, the creak of what sounded like a cabinet opening, the familiar squeak of what he knew was Mr. Kowalski's old refrigerator door, then footsteps returning to the bedroom. The creak of bed springs like someone sitting down on the bed. Ben played back the recording the next morning. The footsteps were there, faint but audible, impossible to mistake for anything else. He took the recording to the police. They listened, exchanged looks. We'll check the apartment again, the detective said. They did. The tape was unbroken. The locks were secure. Inside, the apartment was exactly as they'd left it, dusty, undisturbed, empty. The ME had removed Mr. Kowalski's body weeks ago. There was no one there. But the detective admitted, reluctantly, that he heard something too. When they stood in the apartment in silence, they could hear movement in the apartment below Ben's apartment. Footsteps, voices, normal sounds of occupation. Sound travels weird in old buildings, the detective said. Maybe what you're hearing is actually from a different apartment, bouncing around through the walls and floors. It just seems like it's coming from directly above you. Ben wanted to believe that. but he knew it wasn't true. Over the next 2 weeks, Ben learned Mr. Kowalski's full story. He'd lived in that apartment for 42 years, moved in with his wife in 1981. She died of cancer in 2003, and he'd lived alone ever since. No children, no close family. A few neighbors who'd check on him occasionally, but he was private, didn't like to impose. He'd worked as a bookkeeper his whole life. Retired in 2010, his routine was rigid, mechanical. He'd wake at 6 a.m., make coffee, watch the morning news. He'd take a walk at 8 a.m., buy groceries on Wednesdays, watch Jeopardy at 7:30 p.m., go to bed at 11 p.m. Every day, the same routine. For years, the ME determined he'd died of a heart attack. Probably happened in his sleep. Peaceful, as far as these things go. He'd been dead for approximately 28 days before Ben called the super. 28 days of his body decomposing in that apartment while life went on around him. While neighbors walked past his door. While the city hummed along. While people lived their lives just feet away from his corpse and never knew. Ben thought about that. 28 days. And during all that time, Ben had heard footsteps. Had heard the TV, had heard the sounds of someone living up there. He'd heard Mr. Kowalski's routine, even after Mr. Kowalski was dead. The landlord cleared out the apartment after the police released it. Ben watched them carry out 42 years of one man's life. Furniture, books, clothes, photos. The TV that had been playing when they found him some crime show, apparently. On an endless loop because Mr. Kowalski had fallen asleep watching it and no one turned it off. The apartment was cleaned, repainted, prepared for a new tenant. Ben thought the sounds would stop then. With the apartment empty, truly empty, cleaned of everything, surely it would be quiet. But that night, he heard the footsteps again. 6 a.m., walking from the bedroom to the kitchen, the ghost of a coffee maker percolating. The phantom murmur of a morning news broadcast. 8 a.m. Footsteps to the door. The sound of locks turning. The door opening and closing. Mr. Kowalski leaving for his morning walk. 7:30 p.m. Footsteps, returning to the living room. The sound of someone settling into a chair. The faint audio of Jeopardy, playing. 11 p.m. Footsteps to the bedroom. The creak of bed springs. Then silence until 6 a.m. when it started again. A new tenant moved in 3 weeks later. A young couple, mid-20s, excited about their first apartment in the city. Ben ran into them in the stairwell. "How are you settling in?" he asked. "Great," the woman said. "It's a nice apartment. Bigger than we expected for the price. Have you noticed anything unusual?" They looked at each other. "Like what?" Ben hesitated. "Nothing. Just, old buildings can be quirky." "Oh, the creaky floors, you mean?" "Yeah, we noticed that. Sounds like someone walking around sometimes when we know we're both sitting still. But that's just old buildings, right?" "Right," Ben said. "Just old buildings." 3 months later, the couple moved out. They didn't say why, just broke their lease and left suddenly. The apartment sat empty for 2 months before the next tenant moved in. She lasted 6 weeks. The apartment's been through 4 tenants in 2 years. No one stays. The landlords had to drop the rent twice. People complain about the sounds, the feeling that someone's there when they're alone, the sense that the apartment doesn't want them. Ben still lives in 4D. He's gotten used to it now. The footsteps at 6 a.m., the morning routine, the evening TV, the sounds of Mr. Kowalski's life continuing on above him, playing out the same schedule it kept for 42 years. Sometimes Ben wonders if Mr. Kowalski knows he's dead, if he's trapped in some loop, repeating his routine for eternity, or if dying alone, undiscovered for a month, somehow imprinted his presence so deeply into that apartment that it couldn't let go. He wonders if the same thing will happen to him one day. If he dies in his apartment, how long before someone notices? Will his routine keep playing too? Footsteps echoing through the ceiling for the next tenant below. In a city of 8 million people, surrounded by neighbors, living in buildings where you can hear everything through the walls somehow, you can still die completely alone. And sometimes, not even death is enough to break the routine. The building super told Ben that 5 other people have died alone in the building over the years. Natural causes, mostly. Old age, heart attacks, strokes. All of them lived alone. All of them found days or weeks later. Ben listens more carefully now. To all the sounds in the building. The footsteps above, beside, below. The doors opening and closing. The TVs playing. The daily rhythms of life. And he wonders how many of those sounds are actually from the living. And how many are just routines that couldn't end, even when the people living them did. This story comes from Thomas, and it's about how sometimes inviting a stranger into your home, even temporarily, can become your worst nightmare. Thomas was 32, working as a freelance photographer in Crown Heights, Brooklyn. He lived in a decent-sized 2-bedroom apartment, more space than he needed, honestly. The rent was steep, even with his rent-stabilized lease, and freelance income was unpredictable. So Thomas did what a lot of New Yorkers do. He put a spare bedroom on Airbnb. It had been working fine for about 8 months, mostly tourists, sometimes business travelers, occasional people visiting family in the city. They'd stay 3 days, maybe a week, then leave. Thomas had gotten good at being a host, friendly but not intrusive, provided clean towels and a stocked kitchen, left a guidebook to the neighborhood. In March, he got a booking request from someone named Adrian Marsh. The request was for 2 weeks, which was longer than Thomas usually accepted, but Adrian's profile looked legitimate. Verified ID, positive reviews from other hosts. The message was polite and professional. Asterisk, hi Thomas. I'm relocating to NYC for a new job and need temporary housing while I search for a permanent apartment. I'm quiet, clean, and respectful. Looking forward to staying in your place. Asterisk. 2 weeks at his nightly rate would cover almost a full month's rent. Thomas accepted. Adrian arrived on a Saturday afternoon. Thomas was home to meet him, standard practice, show him around, hand over the keys to the bedroom, explain the house rules. Adrian was in his mid-30s, average height, neatly dressed in business casual clothes. He had a friendly smile, a firm handshake, and 1 large suitcase plus a laptop bag. Thanks so much for this, Adrian said as Thomas showed him the bedroom. Apartment hunting in New York is brutal. This is a lifesaver. No problem, Thomas said. Bathroom shared, kitchen too. Just clean up after yourself and we'll get along fine. You need anything, just knock on my door. Will do. I'll probably be out most days. Apartment viewings and getting set up at the new office. You won't even know I'm here. For the first 4 days, it was fine. Adrian was quiet, neat, barely around. Thomas would hear him leave in the morning, come back late. They'd exchange pleasantries when they crossed paths in the kitchen. Perfect guest. On day 5, Adrian asked if he could extend his stay. The apartment search is taking longer than expected, he explained. Everything's either too expensive or already taken. Would it be okay if I stayed another week? 2 at most? Thomas hesitated. His calendar was clear, and the extra income would be helpful. Yeah, sure. Just update the booking through Airbnb. Of course, I'll do that tonight. But Adrian didn't update the booking. When Thomas checked the app the next day, the reservation still ended in 9 days. He sent Adrian a message through the app. Asterisk, hey, just a reminder to extend the booking if you're staying longer. Asterisk. No response. Thomas knocked on Adrian's bedroom door that evening. Hey man, about extending... Oh yeah, sorry, Adrian said through the barely open door. I'll take care of it tomorrow. Been swamped with work stuff. No worries. Just need it done through the app for insurance purposes and all that. Totally understand. I'll handle it. He didn't. The original 2 weeks ended. Adrian was still there. Thomas confronted him directly. Adrian, your reservation ended yesterday. You need to either extend it officially or make plans to leave. Adrian's demeanor shifted slightly, still friendly, but there was something harder underneath. Look, I'm really sorry about the booking thing. The Airbnb app keeps glitching on my phone, but I'm paid up, right? You got your money? For the 2 weeks, yeah. And I've been a good guest, right? Quiet, clean, respectful? Yes, but that's not the point. You can't just... I'll figure out the booking extension, Adrian said. I promise. I've got apartment viewings all week. I'll be out of your hair soon. Thomas didn't push it. He told himself it was fine. Adrian seemed reasonable, and the money had been helpful. He'd be gone soon. But week 3 became week 4. Adrian stopped even pretending to look for apartments. He started spending more time in the apartment, working from the living room, cooking elaborate meals in the kitchen, spreading his belongings throughout the common areas. Hey, Adrian, Thomas said, trying to keep his voice calm. We need to talk. You've been here a month. The original agreement was 2 weeks. And I appreciate you being flexible, Adrian said, not looking up from his laptop. This city is impossible. Do you know how many apartment applications I've submitted? 15. All rejected or already taken. That's tough, but I need to rent that room to other guests. This is income I'm depending on. I'm paying you, aren't I? Not through Airbnb. You haven't updated the booking in weeks. Adrian finally looked at him. You want me to Venmo you? I can do that. How much? Thomas felt his frustration building. It's not about, look, I need you to find another place. I'm giving you 1 week to make arrangements. Adrian's expression went cold. 1 week? That's pretty unreasonable, Thomas. I have rights as a tenant, you know. You're not a tenant. You're a short-term guest. I've been living here for a month. I get mail delivered here. I've established residency. Legally, that makes me a tenant. And in New York, you can't just kick out a tenant without proper notice and legal process. Thomas felt his stomach drop. What are you talking about? I looked it up, Adrian said calmly. In New York, if someone stays in a rental for more than 30 days, they're considered a tenant, even without a lease. You can't evict me without going through the courts. That takes months, maybe longer. You can't be serious. I'm not trying to be difficult, Adrian said, his voice almost sympathetic. I'm just in a tough spot. I need time to find a place. You're getting paid. I'll keep Venmoing you the daily rate. We can coexist. What's the big deal? Thomas called Airbnb. They were sympathetic, but ultimately unhelpful. Because the guest has stayed beyond 30 days, this is now considered a residential tenancy situation. Airbnb can't intervene in landlord-tenant disputes. You'll need to pursue this through local legal channels. Thomas called a lawyer, a tenant rights lawyer, because that's apparently what this had become. The lawyer confirmed Adrian's claim. In New York, if someone has been residing in a property for more than 30 days, they're considered a tenant regardless of whether there's a written lease. To remove them, you need to file for eviction through housing court. Given current court backlogs, you're looking at 3 to 6 months minimum. 3 to 6 months? At minimum. If he fights it, could be longer. He can claim he's trying to find alternative housing, that he's paying rent, that evicting him would cause hardship. Judges often side with tenants. But he lied to me. He manipulated the situation. Unfortunately, that doesn't matter legally. He established residency. You'll need to serve him with a formal eviction notice and file with the court. Thomas spent $1,800 he didn't have on legal fees. The lawyer drafted the eviction notice. Thomas had to hand-deliver it to Adrian in his own apartment. Adrian read it calmly, then looked up at Thomas. You're really doing this? Kicking out someone who's been nothing but respectful? You lied to me. You manipulated this whole situation from the start. "I've been paying you," Adrian said. "Every week, like clockwork. I've kept the place clean. I haven't bothered you. All I asked for was a little flexibility while I find a permanent place. It's been 6 weeks, and I'm still looking. The market's tough. You're going to make me homeless over this?" The eviction process began. Court dates were set months out. Adrian, of course, contested everything. He filed paperwork claiming Thomas was harassing him, that the eviction was retaliatory, that he'd been a model tenant and Thomas was being unreasonable. Meanwhile, Adrian's behavior in the apartment changed. He stopped being polite, stopped cleaning up after himself. His belongings spread everywhere, the living room, the kitchen, even the bathroom. He started having friends over late at night, playing music, cooking strong-smelling food at 2 a.m. Thomas trying to establish boundaries. "You can't have guests over without asking. This is still my home." "It's my home too now," Adrian said flatly. "I'm a legal tenant. I have rights." Thomas started spending more time away from his own apartment, staying with his girlfriend, working from coffee shops, anything to avoid being there. But it was his Time's apartment. He was paying the full rent while Adrian paid a fraction through sporadic Venmo transfers that didn't even cover his share. Thomas went back to the lawyer. "Can't we do anything to speed this up?" "Not really. The courts are backed up with eviction cases, and Adrian knows exactly what he's doing every delay tactic in the book. He's done this before." "What do you mean?" The lawyer showed Thomas what he'd found. Adrian Marsh had at least 3 previous addresses where similar situations had occurred. Airbnb stays that extended into tenancy disputes, legal battles with hosts. He'd eventually been evicted from all of them, but only after months of legal wrangling. "He's a professional tenant," the lawyer said. "He targets people with spare rooms on Airbnb, establishes residency, then drags out the eviction process as long as possible. Free or cheap housing for months at a time. That's insane. How is this legal?" "It's not supposed to be, but New York's tenant protection laws are strong, and people like Adrian exploit them. He knows exactly how the system works and how to game it." By month 3, Thomas's life was a nightmare. Adrian had completely taken over the apartment. His belongings were everywhere. He changed the Wi-Fi password and refused to give Thomas the new one. "I pay for half the utilities now. I'm entitled to change the password." He had people over constantly. He'd started receiving packages, lots of them. Electronics, furniture, food deliveries. He'd essentially moved his entire life into Thomas's apartment. Thomas couldn't take it anymore. He stopped sleeping there entirely. Started staying with his girlfriend full-time, which put a strain on that relationship too. "Why don't you just change the locks?" she asked. "Keep him out?" "That's illegal. If I do that, he can sue me times and times. It'll hurt my eviction case. I have to play by the rules, and he knows it." The court date finally came. Thomas and his lawyer presented their case. Adrian represented himself, calmly explaining to the judge that he'd been a paying tenant for 3 months, that he had nowhere else to go, that Thomas was trying to make him homeless. The judge ordered a mediation session. No eviction yet, they needed to try to work it out. At mediation, Adrian made an offer. "I'll leave voluntarily if Thomas pays me $5,000 for relocation expenses." "Are you kidding me?" Thomas exploded. "You want me to pay times to leave my own apartment?" "It's a reasonable offer," Adrian said. "Moving is expensive. Finding a new place requires deposits, fees. I'm just asking for help." The mediator actually looked at Thomas like he should consider it. Thomas refused. "Absolutely not. I'm not rewarding you for this." So they went back to court. The judge, overwhelmed with cases, scheduled another hearing for 2 months out. Month 5. Thomas was financially destroyed. He'd been paying full rent on an apartment he couldn't live in. Legal fees were mounting. His girlfriend had broken up with him. "I can't deal with this drama anymore." His photography business was suffering because he couldn't focus on work, and Adrian was thriving. He turned Thomas's apartment into his own personal residence. had his mail forwarded there, updated his driver's license with that address, hosted dinner parties, posted pictures on social media of his place. Thomas drove by the apartment one night, looked up at his windows. He could see Adrian through them, sitting on Thomas's couch, laughing with friends, living Thomas's life in Thomas's home. He felt something break inside him. The next day, Thomas went back to the lawyer. "I'll pay him, whatever he wants. I just want him gone." They negotiated. Adrian wanted $8,000 now. Rent prices have gone up. I need more for a deposit. Thomas borrowed money from his parents, money they'd been saving for their retirement, $8,000 that he'd never be able to pay back quickly. They signed an agreement. Adrian would vacate within 2 weeks upon receipt of payment. Thomas transferred the money, watched his bank account drop to nearly zero. Adrian left 13 days later, took every piece of furniture he'd brought in, took half the kitchen supplies. I bought these, took the shower curtain, took light bulbs from the fixtures. The apartment was trashed, holes in the walls, carpet stained, the bedroom door broken. The security deposit Thomas had originally received through Airbnb was a fraction of what repairs would cost. But Adrian was gone. Finally, after 5 months, Thomas had his apartment back. He spent 3 weeks cleaning, repairing, trying to restore his home to what it had been. The financial damage was catastrophic. $8,000 paid to Adrian, thousands in legal fees, 5 months of lost Airbnb, income, repair costs, and all the rent he'd paid while unable to live there. Total cost, over $35,000. For letting someone stay in his spare bedroom for what was supposed to be 2 weeks. Thomas tried to report Adrian to the police. Fraud, extortion, something. But technically, Adrian hadn't done anything illegal. He'd established tenancy, exercised his legal rights, and eventually left voluntarily after a financial settlement. The police couldn't help. He tried to report him to Airbnb. They banned Adrian's account, but he could just create a new one with a different email. They offered Thomas a $1,000 credit as a host guarantee claim. It was insulting compared to what he'd lost. He tried to sue Adrian in civil court for damages. His lawyer advised against it. He'll just declare bankruptcy or disappear. You'll spend more money chasing him than you'll ever recover. Thomas closed his Airbnb account. Never again. The spare bedroom sits empty now. He can't afford to rent out the entire apartment and move somewhere cheaper because he's still paying off the debt from this nightmare. 6 months later, Thomas saw Adrian's profile on a different short-term rental platform. Different name, Adrian Cole now, instead of Adrian Marsh, but the same photo. The reviews were recent, all positive. Great guest. Very respectful and clean. Thomas tried to warn the platform, explain what Adrian does. They said they'd investigate, but couldn't discuss another user's account with him. Thomas joined an online forum for Airbnb hosts, shared his story. Dozens of people responded with similar experiences. Different names, different cities, but the same pattern. Professional tenants who exploit short-term rentals and tenant protection laws. Some had paid settlements like Thomas. Others had fought it out for months, even years. One host in San Francisco said their tenant had stayed for 18 months before finally being evicted. "They know the system better than we do," one host wrote. "They know tenant rights lawyers, know the courts are backed up, know how to delay everything. And they know most of us will eventually pay them to leave because it's cheaper than continuing to fight." Thomas still lives in that apartment, still has the spare bedroom. Sometimes he thinks about what he could do with the extra income from renting it out, how much it would help with his debt, with rebuilding his savings. But the bedroom door stays locked. The room stays empty. Because Thomas learned something that 5 months of hell taught him. The worst part wasn't the money, or even the loss of his home. It was the helplessness. The feeling of watching someone take over your life, while the system, the courts, the laws, everything told you that you had to let them. Adrian never threatened him, never got violent. never even raised his voice most of the time. He just understood that tenant protection laws, designed to help vulnerable people, could be weaponized by someone who knew how to manipulate them. And the scariest part, Adrian is still out there, still booking short-term rentals, still finding hosts who don't know what he does until it's too late, still living rent-free in other people's homes, moving from place to place, leaving financial destruction in his wake. Thomas sometimes gets messages from other hosts who found his story online. They're going through the same thing, different people, but the same playbook, and Thomas can only tell them what he learned. Document everything, get a lawyer immediately, don't wait, don't negotiate, don't trust that they'll leave voluntarily, and understand that even if you do everything right, you're still looking at months of court battles, thousands in legal fees, and no guarantee you'll win. And maybe, if you're lucky, you'll only lose $35,000 in 5 months of your life. The last time Thomas checked, Adrian or Adrian Cole, or whatever name he's using now, had 5-star reviews on 3 different platforms. Recent stays in Seattle, Austin, Portland. In one review, a host wrote, "Asterisk, Adrian was the perfect guest, extended his stay and we were happy to have him. Clean, quiet, respectful, would host again anytime, asterisk." Thomas wanted to warn them, tell them what was coming, but he didn't, because he knows they wouldn't believe him, just like he didn't believe it could happen to him, not until it was too late, not until the guest who came for 2 weeks had been there for 5 months, had taken over his home, had cost him everything, and there was nothing he could do about it except wait and pay and hope it would eventually end. That's the real horror of this story. Not that it happened to Thomas, but that it's happening right now to someone else, and tomorrow it'll happen to someone new, because people like Adrian never stop. They can't. This is how they live, moving from rental to rental, city to city, exploiting the same loopholes, playing the same game, and the system lets them do it. Every single time. This one's from Maya, and sometimes the shortest encounters are the ones that stay with you. Maya worked late at a tech startup in the financial district. Her company offered parking in a garage 2 blocks from the office, one of those massive underground garages that go down 6 or 7 levels, the kind that feel like concrete mazes. She'd been parking there for about 4 months, usually arriving around 9 a.m. and leaving anywhere between 8 p.m. and midnight, depending on deadlines. Late nights were common in her industry. The garage was mostly automated. You took a ticket on the way in, paid at a kiosk on the way out. But there was always at least one attendant on duty, usually sitting in a small booth near the entrance, watching security monitors. Maya rarely interacted with them. A nod, maybe. A quick thanks when they opened the gate if the automated system glitched. The attendants rotated different people different days. Except for one. She started noticing him around her 3rd month parking there. He worked the late shift, 6 p.m. to 2 a.m., always there when she left. Middle-aged guy, maybe early 50s, heavyset, wearing the standard garage uniform. He had this way of watching her that made her uncomfortable. Not aggressive, not threatening, just attentive. Too attentive. He'd watch her walk from the elevator to her car. She could feel his eyes tracking her across the garage level. When she'd drive past the booth to exit, he'd be standing at the window, looking at her car, at her. Maya told herself she was being paranoid. It was his job to watch the garage. He was probably just bored. But one night in November, she worked especially late, left the office at 11:45 p.m. The garage was almost empty at that hour, just a handful of cars scattered across the massive space. Maya got off the elevator on P4, the 4th level down where her assigned spot was. The fluorescent lights flickered, they always did. The concrete amplified every sound. Her footsteps echoed as she walked toward her car. She was about halfway there when she heard it. Other footsteps, behind her. Maya turned around. The attendant was there, maybe 30 feet away, walking in her direction. "Hey," he called out. "Got a second?" Every instinct told Maya to run, but she was raised to be polite, not to make assumptions, not to be rude. And he worked there. He was just doing his job, probably. Sure, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "What's up?" He walked closer, too close. She could smell cigarettes and coffee on him. "I've been meaning to talk to you," he said. "You work real late, huh?" "Sometimes. Depends on the project. That's not safe, you know, young woman like you, leaving this late. Lot of bad people out there." Maya's heart was pounding. "I'm fine. Thank you for your concern." She turned toward her car. He moved with her, keeping pace. "I could walk you to your car," he said. "When you work late, make sure you're safe. I know which spot is yours. I could meet you at the elevator." "That's really not necessary." "It's no trouble. I'm here anyway. We could exchange numbers. You could text me when you're coming down, and I'd make sure no one bothers you." Maya reached her car, fumbling for her keys. "I appreciate the offer, but I'm okay. Really." She got in quickly, locked the doors. He stood there, 5 feet from her driver's side window, just watching as she started the engine. As she drove toward the exit ramp, she checked her rearview mirror. He was still standing there, in the middle of the parking level, watching her car disappear up the ramp. The next night, Maya parked on a different level, P2 instead of P4. She had multiple assigned spots, apparently something about corporate accounts. She figured if she varied her parking, maybe he wouldn't know where to find her. She worked until 10:30, trying to leave a bit earlier. When the elevator opened on P2, her stomach dropped. He was there, standing near her car. Different level, but somehow he'd known. "There you are," he said, smiling. "I was starting to worry. Usually you park on P4. Maya's hands went cold. "How did you know which car is mine?" "It's my job to know the cars," he said. "I memorize the regulars, license plates, makes, models." "You drive a 2019 Honda Accord, silver, plate number." He recited her license plate from memory. "I need to go," Maya said, walking quickly toward her car. "Did you think about what I said?" he called after her. "About me walking you to your car? I'm serious about that offer. I worry about you down here alone." Maya didn't respond, got in her car, locked the doors, and drove out as fast as she could safely manage. She complained to building security the next day. They said they'd talked to the garage management company, but parking was contracted through a third party. The building didn't directly control the garage staff. "We can make a complaint," the security guard told her. "But honestly, it doesn't sound like he's done anything actionable. Has he touched you? Threatened you?" "No, but he's making me uncomfortable. He's following me to my car, memorizing my license plate. That's his job, technically. Parking attendants are supposed to monitor vehicles. He's tracking which level I park on." The guard looked sympathetic but helpless. "I'll file the complaint, but you might want to consider parking somewhere else if you're feeling unsafe." Maya didn't have that option. The company paid for parking as a benefit, and other garages nearby were $600 plus a month out of pocket. For a week, she had a coworker walk her to her car. Marcus from her team would ride down with her, wait until she was safely in her car with the engine running. The attendant never approached when Marcus was there, just watched from his booth. But Marcus had his own schedule, his own life. By the second week, Maya felt guilty asking him to stay late just to escort her. She told him she'd be fine, that the complaint had been filed, and she was sure the attendant would back off. On her first night alone again, she took the elevator down at 9:45 p.m., decided to face this, not let some creepy guy control her life. The elevator opened on P3. She'd deliberately chosen a random level this time, one she'd never parked on before. He was there, standing right in front of the elevator doors when they opened. "I know you complained about me," he said. His voice was different now, harder. Maya's finger hit the closed door button frantically. He stepped forward, blocking the doors with his body. I was just trying to be nice, trying to make sure you're safe. And you report me like I'm some kind of criminal? Please step back, Maya said, her voice shaking. You think you're better than me? Too good for someone who works in a parking garage? I never said that. I just want to go to my car. I could lose my job because of you, he said. 22 years I've worked in parking garages, never had a complaint. Then you come along. The elevator alarm started blaring. Maya's finger was on the emergency button. He stepped back, hands up. Fine, go to your car. But you should know, I know where you work. I know your schedule. I know everything about you. The doors closed. Maya rode back up to the lobby, ran to building security, told them what happened. They called the police. The police came, took her statement, went down to talk to the attendant. He denied everything, said she must have misunderstood, that he was just doing his job, that maybe she was stressed from work and misinterpreting things. The garage management company reviewed the security footage. The cameras in the elevators didn't have audio. The footage showed him standing near the elevator, showed Maya pressing the alarm, showed him stepping back, but nothing definitively threatening. It's your word against his, the police officer told her. And unfortunately, standing near an elevator isn't a crime. We can file a report, but there's not much we can do unless he actually threatens you or touches you. The garage company moved him to the day shift pending investigation, put a different attendant on nights. Maya was told she was safe to park there again, but she never did. She started taking Ubers to work, $40 a day, both ways. It destroyed her budget, but she couldn't bring herself to go back to that garage. 3 weeks later, she was walking to a coffee shop near her office during lunch. She saw him, on the sidewalk, half a block away, wearing civilian clothes. When he saw her looking, he smiled and waved. Maya turned around and went back to her office. Didn't leave the building for the rest of the day. She reported it to the police. Did he approach you? No. Did he threaten you? No. Did he follow you? I don't know. I left before I could find out. Without direct threat or action, there's not much we can do. Maya quit her job 2 weeks later, found a position at a different company, different neighborhood, across the city. Took a slight pay cut, but it was worth it. She never found out if the attendant was actually stalking her or if seeing him that day was coincidence. She never found out if he really knew where she lived, like she feared, or if that was just paranoia. She just knew that she couldn't keep living in fear, couldn't keep spending money she didn't have on Ubers, couldn't keep looking over her shoulder in her own neighborhood. So she left, changed her routine, changed her job, changed her route, and she hopes that was enough. The thing that haunts Maya most isn't what he did, it's what he could have done. He had her license plate, her car information, probably her home address. It's easy to look that up with a plate number. He knew her schedule, knew when she'd be alone in that garage. He had keys to every level, access to every corner. And the system, security, police, management, none of them could do anything until he actually did something, until the threat became action, until uncomfortable became dangerous. She thinks about other women parking in that garage, whether he's doing the same thing to them, whether the day shift was actually a punishment or just moved the problem to different victims. She thinks about how many other parking attendants, security guards, doormen, people with access, people with information are watching women they work around, memorizing schedules, tracking movements, collecting information for reasons no one wants to think about. And she wonders how many women right now are walking through parking garages feeling watched. How many are telling themselves they're being paranoid. How many are trying to be polite, trying not to make assumptions, trying not to be rude, until something happens, until the feeling becomes fact, until uncomfortable becomes dangerous. And by then, it's too late. Maya's okay now. New job, new routine, different parking situation. She doesn't work late anymore, doesn't put herself in vulnerable positions if she can help it, but she still checks her rearview mirror compulsively. still looks over her shoulder on empty streets, still feels her heart race in parking garages, because that's what encounters like this do. They don't just scare you in the moment, they change how you move through the world forever. And somewhere, in some parking garage, in some city, he's still there, still working, still watching, still memorizing license plates. This final story comes from Emma, and it's about how the most terrifying things in the city aren't always supernatural. Sometimes they're brutally, horribly real. Emma was 27, working 2 jobs to survive in New York paralegal during the day, bartender 3 nights a week. She'd been living with roommates in Astoria, but after a falling out with one of them, she needed to find her own place, fast. Her budget was $1,400 a month. In Queens, maybe. In a neighborhood she'd need to research carefully, probably with a long commute. She scrolled through StreetEasy, Zillow, Craigslist, Facebook housing groups. Everything in her price range was either a scam or a room the size of a closet in someone's apartment where she'd share a bathroom with 4 strangers. Then she found it, a studio in Sunnyside, $1,350 a month. The photo showed a real apartment, not huge, but decent. Kitchen, bathroom, a separate alcove for a bed. Hardwood floors, decent natural light, recent renovation, according to the listing. The landlord was a man named Mr. Huang who owned a small portfolio of properties in the neighborhood. Emma called him immediately. The apartment just became available, he told her in accented English. Previous tenant left suddenly. I need to rent it quickly, that's why the price is good. Why did they leave suddenly? A pause. Personal reasons. She didn't say much, just broke the lease and moved out. Young woman, maybe your age. Seemed nice, but troubled, I think. Emma should have asked more questions. Should have wondered why someone would break a lease on an apartment this affordable. But she was desperate, and $1,350 for a studio in Sunnyside was too good to pass up. She met Mr. Huang the next day. He was in his 60s, tired-looking, wearing a cardigan and slippers, even though it was 2 p.m. The building was old but well-maintained, a classic Queens walk-up, 4 stories, maybe 8 apartments total. The studio was on the 2nd floor, 2B. When Mr. Huang unlocked the door, Emma's first thought was, this is actually nice. It was bigger than the photo suggested. The renovation was recent new appliances, fresh paint, refinished floors. The bathroom was small but clean. The windows faced the street, letting in good light. Why is it so cheap? Emma asked. Mr. Huang hesitated. Like I said, previous tenant left quickly. And, I should tell you, someone died in this apartment. Long time ago, maybe 12 years. The law says I have to disclose. Emma's stomach tightened. How did they die? Police said it was domestic incident, very sad. Happened before I owned the building. Previous landlord never told me, but I found out later from other tenants. I had the apartment completely renovated 2 years ago, knew everything. But still, some people don't want to live where something bad happened. A domestic incident, Emma repeated. You mean, a woman was killed by her boyfriend. He went to prison. It was in the news at the time, but long time ago now. The apartment has been rented several times since. Good tenants, mostly. Just the last one, she only stayed 3 months. Left very suddenly. Emma walked around the apartment, tried to feel if there was anything wrong with it, any bad energy or whatever people talked about. It felt fine, just an apartment, and she was running out of options. I'll take it, she said. The first month was normal. Emma moved in, set up her space, settled into a routine. The building was quiet, mostly older tenants who kept to themselves. Her neighbors seemed nice enough. She'd wave at Mrs. Park from 2 Amperes, nod at the couple in 3B. The apartment was comfortable. She felt safe there, which was more than she'd felt in her old place with a hostile roommate. But in week 5, she met Diane. Emma was checking her mail in the lobby when an older woman approached her, mid-60s, well-dressed, with sharp eyes and a careful smile. "You're in 2B?" the woman asked. "Yes, just moved in last month." The woman's smile faded. "I'm Diane. I used to live in this building, second floor. I knew the woman who died in your apartment. Her name was Sarah Chen." Emma felt uncomfortable but tried to be polite. "I'm sorry. That must have been difficult. Do you ever hear anything strange?" Diane asked abruptly. "In the walls? At night?" "No, nothing. It's been quiet. The last tenant did. The one before you. She came to me after 2 months, asked if I knew the apartment's history. She said she heard scratching in the walls, crying late at night. I told her what happened to Sarah, and she left the next week." Emma forced a laugh. "I don't believe in ghosts." "Neither did she," Diane said. "Not at first." She handed Emma a piece of paper with a phone number. "If you ever need to talk about the apartment, I live 3 blocks away. I check on that place sometimes, I can't help it." Sarah was my friend. After Diane left, Emma went back to her apartment feeling unsettled. She Googled Sarah Chen Sunnyside murder. The articles came up immediately. Asterisk Marcus Webb, 31, was sentenced today for the 2012 murder of his girlfriend, Sarah Chen, 28. Webb had a history of domestic violence charges and was on probation when he killed Chen in her Sunnyside apartment. Neighbors reported hearing arguments and sounds of struggle before police arrived to find Chen dead from blunt force trauma and strangulation. Webb fled the scene but was apprehended 2 days later. Asterisk. Emma read article after article. Each one made her feel sicker. Sarah Chen had been a graphic designer. She'd lived alone in 2B for a year before meeting Marcus Webb. By all accounts, the relationship started normally, but deteriorated quickly. Sarah had confided in friends that Marcus was controlling, jealous, violent. She tried to break up with him multiple times. The night she died, neighbors heard arguing around 11 p.m., loud, escalating, then sounds of a struggle, then silence. One neighbor called 911, but by the time police arrived, Marcus had fled, and Sarah was dead. According to court testimony, Marcus had strangled her first, then, in a rage, had beaten her. The prosecutor described it as overkill, violence beyond what was necessary to cause death, evidence of extreme anger, loss of control. Sarah's body had been found in the bedroom area, right where Emma's bed was now. Emma tried not to think about it. Sarah's death was tragic, but it had happened 12 years ago. The apartment had been renovated. Other people had lived here since. It was just a space. But she couldn't stop reading. She found Sarah's social media profiles, still active in that ghostly way that profiles of dead people are. Photos of a smiling young woman, posts about design projects and coffee and her cat. The last post was 3 days before she died. Asterisk. Sometimes you have to be brave enough to walk away, even when it's hard. Asterisk. Emma found tributes from Sarah's friends, a memorial page, an article about domestic violence that used Sarah's story as an example of why women struggling to leave abusive relationships need better support systems. And Emma found something else, an interview with Diane, Sarah's neighbor and friend, from a year after the murder. Asterisk. Sarah tried to get a restraining order, but the process takes time. She told me she was scared Marcus would find out and retaliate. She was right to be scared. The system failed her. By the time the order was granted, she was already dead. Asterisk. Week 7. Emma woke up at 3:17 a.m. to a sound, scratching in the walls. She lay perfectly still, listening. It came from the wall next to her bed. Slow, deliberate scratching, like fingernails on drywall. Emma turned on her light. The sound stopped. She waited. Nothing. Just the ambient noise of the building pipes, distant traffic, the hum of the refrigerator. She turned off the light. Within 30 seconds, the scratching started again. Emma grabbed her phone, used the flashlight to examine the wall. Nothing visible, no cracks, no holes, no signs of mice or rats, just a normal wall. The scratching continued for about 10 minutes, then stopped. Emma didn't sleep the rest of the night. She told herself it was pipes, or mice, or the buildings settling. Old buildings made weird noises. But it happened again the next night. Same time, 3:17 a.m. Same wall, same slow, deliberate scratching. Emma called an exterminator. He came, checked the walls, found nothing. No evidence of rodents or insects, he said. Your walls are solid. Whatever you're hearing, it's not pests. Then what is it? He shrugged. Old buildings. Could be temperature changes, expansion and contraction. Could be pipes. Could be sound carrying from another apartment. But Emma knew what time Sarah had died. She'd read it in the police report that was part of the public court record. Police received the 911 call at 11:43 p.m. They estimated time of death between 11:15 p.m. and 11:30 p.m. But Sarah hadn't died immediately. According to the medical examiner's testimony, she'd survived the initial strangulation, had been alive, possibly conscious, for some time after. The beating had come later, Marcus returning to finish what he'd started. The medical examiner couldn't determine exactly how long Sarah had lived after the attack began, but it could have been hours. Emma lay in bed, thinking about that. Thinking about Sarah lying where Emma's bed was now, injured, dying, alone. Had she tried to call for help? Had she scratched at the walls, trying to alert neighbors? Had she died at 3:17 a.m.? Week 9. Emma was exhausted from lack of sleep. The scratching happened every night now, always at 3:17 a.m., always the same wall. She tried sleeping in different positions, facing away from the wall, tried earplugs, tried white noise. Nothing worked. The scratching cut through everything. She called Diane. The last tenant. What exactly did she hear? The same thing you're hearing, I imagine, Diane said. She described scratching and sometimes crying. Very faint, like someone crying who's trying not to be heard. Did she ever see anything? A pause. She said once she woke up and felt like someone was in the apartment, like she wasn't alone. But when she turned on the light, there was no one there. Just a feeling. Emma had felt it too, several times now. The sense that someone was watching her, that the apartment wasn't empty even when she was alone. I think I need to move, Emma said. Most people do, Diane replied. Mr. Huang is a good landlord, but he can't keep tenants in that apartment, not since he renovated it. What do you mean, since he renovated it? The apartment was fine before, quiet. People lived there for years without issues. But 2 years ago, Mr. Huang did that big renovation, ripped out the old kitchen, redid the bathroom, refinished the floors, knocked down a non-structural wall to open up the space. And ever since, every tenant leaves within a few months. They all report the same things, sounds, feelings, a sense that something's wrong. Emma felt cold. Which wall did he knock down? The one between the bedroom alcove and the main space made the apartment feel bigger. The wall where Emma heard the scratching. Emma did more research. She found building permits, renovation records. The wall Mr. Huang had removed had been original to the apartment's 1,950 seconds layout. It had divided the space for decades. She found crime scene photos in the court record's public domain now that the case was closed. They showed Sarah's apartment before the renovation. The wall had still been there. And behind it, in the narrow space between the bedroom and the main room, was where Sarah's body had been found. Not in the bedroom itself, in the narrow space behind that wall. According to the police report, Marcus had dragged her there after strangling her in the bedroom. She'd been wedged in that tight space, out of sight from the main apartment. That's why neighbors who looked in the windows hadn't seen her body immediately. That's why it took police a few minutes to find her once they entered the apartment. Sarah had died in that narrow space, behind the wall, alone, in the dark, in pain. And now that wall was gone. The space was open, exposed. Emma couldn't stay. She knew it wasn't rational, knew there had to be logical explanations for everything, but she couldn't sleep, couldn't feel safe, couldn't stop thinking about Sarah dying inches from where Emma slept every night. She told Mr. Huang she was breaking the lease. He didn't argue, didn't even try to keep the security deposit. "I understand," he said, sounding defeated. "I'll put it back on the market. Maybe the next tenant will be okay." "Why don't you just close it up?" Emma asked. "Stop renting it?" "I can't afford to. I need the income. I thought renovating would help, would make it fresh, new, but I think maybe I made it worse." Emma moved in with a friend temporarily while she searched for a new place. The day she went back to 2B to get her last boxes, she ran into Diane on the street. "You're leaving," Diane said. It wasn't a question. "Yeah, I can't stay there." Diane nodded. "No one ever can, not anymore." "Do you think it's really haunted?" Emma asked. "Or are we all just psyching ourselves out because we know what happened?" Diane considered this. "I think Sarah died alone in terrible pain, and no amount of renovation can change that. I think places remember trauma, and I think when you're alone in that apartment at night, you're not really alone. Whether that's a ghost or just the weight of what happened there, I don't know. Does it matter?" Emma found a new apartment in Astoria. $1,650 a month, more than she wanted to pay, but worth it. The building was new construction, 10 years old, no history, no deaths, no trauma soaked into the walls. She slept through the night for the first time in weeks, but she still thinks about Sarah Chen, about a woman who just wanted to live her life, who had a job she loved and friends who cared about her and a future ahead of her, a woman who made the mistake of dating the wrong person and paid for it with her life. Emma thinks about how Sarah tried to leave, got a restraining order, did everything right, and it wasn't enough. She thinks about all the women right now living in fear of partners or ex-partners. Women trying to leave, trying to stay safe, navigating a system that's supposed to protect them but so often doesn't. And she thinks about 2B in Sunnyside, about Mr. Huang putting it back on the market, about another person seeing that $1,350 price tag and thinking it's too good to pass up, about them moving in, settling in, and then waking up at 3:17 a.m. to the sound of scratching in the walls, about them lying there in the dark, wondering what they're hearing, not knowing, not yet, that they're sleeping where someone died, where someone spent their last moments in pain and fear and isolation. Emma looked up the apartment a few weeks ago. It's listed again, new photos, same low price. The listing doesn't mention Sarah Chen, doesn't mention the murder. New York law requires disclosure of deaths in apartments, but only if they occurred within 3 years. Sarah died 12 years ago. Legally, Mr. Huang doesn't have to say anything. The listing just says, recently renovated studio in Sunnyside, hardwood floors, updated kitchen and bathroom, great natural light, must see, $1,350 divided by month. And someone will see it. Someone will think it's a great deal. Someone will move in, happy to have found affordable housing in an impossible city. And one night, they'll wake up at 3:17 a.m. to scratching in the walls. And maybe they'll last longer than Emma did. Maybe they'll convince themselves it's nothing, just old building sounds, just their imagination. Or maybe they'll do what Emma did, what the tenant before her did, what every tenant since the renovation has done. Maybe they'll leave, break their lease, lose their deposit, pay the penalty, anything to get out of that apartment. Because some places carry their history in ways you can feel. Some tragedies are too big to renovate away, and sometimes the rent is cheap for a reason that has nothing to do with market rates or eager landlords or recent renovations. A reason that has everything to do with what happened in that space, What was lost there? What remains? Sarah Chen deserved better. She deserved a system that protected her. She deserved to live. And even now, 12 years later, Emma believes Sarah is still there, still trying to be heard, still scratching at walls that no longer exist, trying to alert someone, anyone, that something is wrong, that she needs help, that she's still there, in that narrow space, waiting for someone to see her, to remember her, to know that she mattered. The rent is cheap for a reason, and that reason is still in the walls.